Chapter 2465. Luo Shui spoke in a calm tone. There was not a trace of anger or hatred in her voice. Her expression and eyes were very calm. These were all her heartfelt words. She had already thought it through and believed it was the truth. She did not think that this was a mistake, and she did not feel sorry for Yun Yao. But in Yun Yao's eyes, the current Luo Shui was so unfamiliar. She looked at Luo Shui with a burning gaze and shook her head gently. It's hard to believe that you would say these words yourself. I never thought that your true thoughts would be like this. No wonder you used to care and take care of me so much in the past. Sure enough, there is no love without a reason in this world. There is always a purpose and a conspiracy. Luo Shui nodded slightly and sighed faintly. All right, I've said what needs to be said. You also understand the reason. You can go with peace of mind. As her voice fell, she slowly stretched out her palms and released a dense white light of divine soul into Yun Yao's body. She wanted to refine Yun Yao's divine soul and seize all of Yun Yao's memories. In this way, after she took over Yun Yao's body, she would not reveal any flaws and would not let Ji Tianqing see any clues. Swoosh! Swoosh! Two streaks of dense white light, like two tentacles, reached into Yun Yao's mind and swept towards her divine soul. In the next moment, Yun Yao's divine soul would be disintegrated. However, Yun Yao was sealed by a powerful divine array and could not move or resist at all. At this moment of imminent peril, something unexpected happened. Two different divine soul powers suddenly flew out of Yun Yao's stomach and entered her mind, firmly wrapping around her divine soul. Moreover, two divine soul voices, one male and one female, were transmitted into Luo Shui's mind. You bad woman! Stop it! Don't hurt mother! The first to sound was a clear and pleasant girl's voice. Her tone was filled with anger and worry. Then, another boy's voice sounded. If you want to harm mother, then kill us first. Although this voice was very young, like a 3-year-old child, the tone was very firm and brave. Without a doubt, the two souls that had suddenly appeared were Yaya and Chen. The two of them were fearless and resolutely protected Yun Yao's soul. Such an unforeseen event caused Luo Shui to hurriedly withdraw his hand and frown fiercely. She stared at Yun Yao's abdomen with a face full of surprise. She couldn't help but exclaim, are those the voices of the two children's souls? They hadn't even been born yet, but their souls were already so powerful. How is this possible? Although Luo Shui had long known that Yun Yao had been pregnant for many years, she had never given birth to two children. Those two children were so extraordinary. In the future, they would definitely be world-shaking peerless geniuses. However, Luo Shui had never expected that the two children would already possess powerful souls and extraordinary strength while they were still in the womb. Furthermore, the two children had independent and complete thoughts, no different from normal people. This was too shocking. For a moment, Luo Shui's body stiffened as he stood there, hesitating and weighing his options. The two white lights of the souls that she had released also stopped in Yun Yao's mind. She didn't know whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, Yaya used the voice of the soul to say, Mother, don't be afraid. Yaya and brother will protect you. Chen confronted Luo Shui and said in a calm and serious tone, Martial God Luo Shui, father and mother both regard you as the most trusted person. I didn't expect you to do such a thing. If you insist on doing things your own way, then kill me and Yaya first. We will live and die together with mother. However, I must remind you that even if you have taken over mother's body, Yaya and I are already dead. Father will definitely find out. With father's intelligence and wisdom, he will quickly figure out your scheme and understand the truth. At that time, no matter how you quibble and cover up, it will be useless. Father will definitely break off relations with you and kill you to avenge the three of us. Chinchin's words were clear and orderly. Her tone was low and dignified, and it actually had some soul-shaking power. While Luo Shui was greatly surprised, her expression also became more and more unsightly. Her face became gloomy, and her brows furrowed tightly together. A hint of hesitation flashed in her eyes. She had to admit that what Chen Chen said was very reasonable. Either she stopped and gave up, or she would be the villain to the end. However, things had already come to this point. She had already told Yun Yao her plan and conspiracy. How could she give up? If she insisted on doing things her own way and killed Chen Chen and Yaya first, and then refined Yun Yao's soul, then she wouldn't be able to explain it to Ji Tianqing in the future. Therefore, Chen Chen and Yaya absolutely couldn't be killed. Even if she used a secret technique to knock the two children unconscious and then took over Yun Yao's body, it was still impossible. After all, the two children already knew the truth. Once they told Ji Tianqing the truth, this matter would still be exposed. In any case, this matter wouldn't work no matter what. Luo Shui immediately fell into a dilemma. She stared at Yun Yao in a daze, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her hand stopped in the air and trembled slightly. She was struggling fiercely in her heart. This was because after thinking about it, she realized that there was only one solution to this matter. It's already impossible to hide from the two children and replace Yun Yao as Tianqing's wife. If I kill the two children and take over Yun Yao's body, I won't be able to hide it from Tianqing, and it will soon be exposed. The only thing I can do now is to give up on Tianqing and sacrifice the two children and Yun Yao. That way, I will become the reincarnation of goddess Yaoguang and become enemies with Tianqing. We will never be able to reconcile. When she thought of this, Luo Shui's heart ached faintly. Even her breathing became cold. However, she had no way out. She had no other choice. 30,000 miles away from the ancient viewing platform. In the shattered sky, Ji Tianqing and the white-haired woman were still fighting fiercely. However, after exchanging 2,000 blows, the outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Ji Tianqing was slightly better. He was only slightly injured. There were a few wounds on his chest and back. Golden divine blood soaked his white robe, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. On the other hand, the white-haired woman's injuries were obviously more serious. Not only was her entire body covered in wounds, but her dress was also stained with blood. There was also a fist-sized bloody hole on her waist. It was caused by the god-slaying flying dagger. The wound was difficult to heal. Moreover, she had been injured a few months ago and had yet to recover. She was also seriously injured by Ji Tianqing. Her strength had been greatly weakened, and her aura had become extremely chaotic. Ji Tianqing saw that she was about to lose, so he no longer delayed and used his ultimate move with all his might. Great rotating sacred sword. Following his low shout, the sky lit up with starlight that blotted out the sun. Tens of thousands of starry swords shot down like meteors, covering a radius of thousands of miles. The white-haired woman was under great pressure. Her expression was solemn, and a wry smile flashed across her eyes. Luo Shui, you told me not to hurt him before. But now it seems that you have underestimated this kid's strength. Chapter 2466. The white-haired woman smiled bitterly to herself. She had already tried her best and could only stall for time until now. Facing the starry swords that blotted out the sky, she could only use her strongest life-saving trump card. See God's shield. The white-haired woman shouted in a low voice. Her palms lit up with an icy blue brilliance, and a round shield the size of a millstone appeared. The shield was like an ice crystal. It was exquisite and translucent, and it flickered with a gorgeous icy blue light. The shield was round, but there were 9 sharp thorns and blades protruding from the edges of the shield. It exuded a terrifying chill. Obviously, this was a divine shield that could be used for both offense and defense. Under the white-haired woman's control, the millstone-sized sea god's shield instantly expanded 100 times and became as big as a mountain. Boom! 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 Thousands of starry swords slammed into the sea god's shield with the power to destroy everything. A series of loud bangs erupted. The loud bangs shook the sky and spread thousands of miles away. The sky was blasted into smithereens, becoming riddled with holes, revealing a vast expanse of pitch-black void. The sea god's shield was also trembling. It flickered with an icy blue brilliance, and cracks appeared on it. Fortunately, the divine shield did not shatter. The white-haired woman tried her best to control the divine shield and blocked all the sword lights. Most of the tens of thousands of starry swords collapsed, bursting into starlight fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. However, those starry fragments condensed into even more light swords and stabbed at the white-haired woman. Instantly, the white-haired woman was trapped in a sky full of sword lights and could not escape. While she was shocked, her expression became more and more serious. She did not counterattack and finally decided to retreat. Bam! 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 As countless sword lights slammed into the sea god's shield, the white-haired woman quickly retreated under the protection of the divine shield. Seeing that she was about to escape, Ji Tianqing quickly chased after her with his sword. Swish! 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 He swung his sword and slashed 7 dazzling golden sword lights at the white-haired woman, but they were all blocked by the sea god's shield. The divine shield was flashing with cold light and trembling non-stop, but it was still intact and sturdy. 10 breaths later, the white-haired woman retreated out of the range of the sword lights. She used her teleportation technique and broke through the sky to escape. Shwa! Her figure flashed and disappeared into the void crack. She passed through several layers of alternate spaces and fled thousands of miles away. Ji Tianqing chased after her, but he lost track of the white-haired woman's aura. He could only stop in front of the spatial rift. This battle that could be called a battle of the pinnacle was finally over. The sword light fragments that filled the sky fell down like heavy snow, and the raging storm gradually subsided. Ji Tianqing secretly adjusted his divine power and calmed himself down. He suddenly thought of Yun Yao and Luo Shui. He frowned and muttered to himself, "This is bad. I chased after the white-haired woman for so long, yet Luo Shui did not follow me, nor did he send me a message. Could it be that the white-haired woman was trying to lure me away? She had accomplices who were currently dealing with Luo Shui and Yao Yao. Could her accomplice be General Dragon Fu? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart suddenly burned with worry. He quickly turned around and rushed back. Swish! He used his teleportation divine ability, and his body lit up with white light. His figure flashed and crossed 1,000 miles. Next, he streaked across the sky like a stream of light and rushed back at his fastest speed. In a short 15 minutes, he had flown more than 15,000 miles and returned to the vicinity of the mountain peak where Yun Yao was in seclusion. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing landed on the mountain peak and looked around with his sharp eyes. He also released his divine sense to investigate the situation. Luckily, everything around the mountain peak is normal. There are no signs of fighting. This means that Luo Shui was not attacked by any experts. But I clearly asked Luo Shui to guard this place. How did she disappear? Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a little puzzled. Could it be that Luo Shui was also lured away by someone's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain? If that's the case, then wouldn't Yao Yao be in danger? With this sudden thought, he could not be bothered to look for Luo Shui. He quickly landed at the foot of the mountain and cast a spell to escape underground. Swoosh! He drilled into the soil and flew underground without any obstruction. Soon, he arrived outside the cave. The cave that Luo Shui had dug was sealed by 2 layers of divine arrays. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to scan and found that the divine arrays were intact and operating normally. This made him feel much more at ease, and his anxious mood also eased. However, after some consideration, he still decided to enter the cave and see Yun Yao's situation with his own eyes. He used his God's eye technique and stared at the 2 layers of ceiling divine arrays, carefully observing them. After a while, he saw some clues and found a way to break it. Ha ha ha. Luo Shui actually still remembers this lesser double moon formation. Back then, I only casually mentioned it once to give her some advice. I didn't expect her to remember it in her heart and integrate it into the yin-yang heaven suppression formation. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a smile. He muttered a few words and began to break the formation. Swish. 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 He waved his hand and shot out rays of dazzling golden divine light into the ceiling divine arrays, breaking the divine arrays as if they were silk from a cocoon. In a short 15 minutes, he had broken the 2 divine arrays. Swoosh! The divine arrays flashed with 5-colored light, and a door that was more than 10 feet tall appeared. Ji Tianqing stepped through the light door and entered the array. He quickly passed through a dark tunnel and arrived at a spacious cave. This cave had a radius of 1,000 feet, and there were traces of human excavation everywhere. There were more than 10 gemstones embedded in the walls, and the light was a little dim. Ji Tianqing looked around the cave, and his gaze fell on the middle of the cave. There was a high platform made of jade, and it was shining with 5-colored divine light, exuding a vast and mighty divine power. When he saw the situation on the high platform, his body stiffened, and his expression changed. There were 2 women on the high platform. One of them was a woman in a white dress, and she was sitting cross-legged on the high platform. She was Yun Yao. Opposite Yun Yao sat a woman in an icy blue dress. She was Luo Shui. Hundreds of divine lights extended from the high platform and bound Yun Yao like ropes. They released an extremely powerful divine power and firmly suppressed Yun Yao. She couldn't move, and she looked at Luo Shui with a complicated expression. She shook her head and tried to persuade Luo Shui, and tears welled up in her eyes. Luo Shui closed her eyes and turned a deaf ear to her words. Pure white divine light surged from her palms, and she was using some kind of divine power. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and his brows furrowed tightly. He never would have thought that such a thing would happen in just an hour after he left. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he couldn't help but shout, "Luo Shui! What are you doing?" A cold shout that sounded like muffled thunder broke the silence and reverberated in the cave. Ji Tianqing's tone was a little angry, disappointed, and worried. Yun Yao, whose eyes were filled with tears, was relieved when she heard his voice. She hurriedly shouted, "Tianqing! Quick! Stop her! The Divine Master has gone crazy." Chapter 2467. Yun Yao was suppressed by more than 10 divine arrays. She was unable to move or use her strength. In such a situation, she said those words with tears in her eyes and an anxious tone. Ji Tianqing saw this and felt a strong sense of anger and worry. At the same time, the doubts that he had suppressed in his heart completely erupted. He suddenly remembered what the ancestor Fiend Celestial had said to Yun Yao back then. Which of those who became gods didn't step on mountains of corpses and seas of blood? How can there be good people? Luo Shui is using you as a cauldron to revive Yaoguang and then take over your body. Her final goal is to turn herself into Yaoguang. When the ancestor Fiend Celestial said those words, he and Yun Yao did not take it to heart. They only thought that the ancestor Fiend Celestial was deliberately slandering them. The 2 of them did not believe that Luo Shui would do such a despicable thing. But now, Ji Tianqing saw with his own eyes that Yun Yao was suppressed and Luo Shui was casting her arts. No matter how unbelievable it was, he had to accept reality. Luo Shui! Stop! Ji Tianqing was shocked and angry. He glared at Luo Shui and shouted angrily, "To think that Yao Yao and I treated you like family and trusted you unconditionally. I didn't expect that you would actually do such a thing. Stop immediately. Otherwise, we will break all ties. If you dare to hurt Yunyao, I will not forgive you. However, Luo Shui turned a deaf ear to his words. She still had her back to him and even sped up her arts. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing became even more furious. He rushed over in a flash and slapped Luo Shui with his palm. Yunyao saw Ji Tianqing attack and immediately shouted anxiously, "No! Tianqing, stop!" However, when she shouted these words, the dazzling golden divine light from Ji Tianqing's palm had already fiercely struck the Luo River. Bam! Luo Shui did not dodge and was hit squarely on the back by the divine light. She was sent flying and rolled on the high platform, landing behind Yunyao. Just as she was about to stand up, she spat out a mouthful of blood and her face became as pale as paper. She stood up weakly and staggered forward. She looked at Ji Tianqing with dim eyes. Her blood-stained face revealed a bitter self-mocking smile. He, as expected of Kenshin. Even an expert like Master could only delay you for an hour. Luo Shui's voice was hoarse and calm. Master? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with a frown, "Is the white-haired woman who attacked me your master?" "That's right." Luo Shui did not hide anything and nodded. She is known as Fairy Yuqing and has been living in seclusion in the jade-clear sky of the Eastern Sea. Ji Tianqing came to a realization and said with a serious expression, "In that case, you colluded with Fairy Yuqing and deliberately let her lure me away. And you took the opportunity to enter the cave, subdued Yunyao, and wanted to possess her body?" Luo Shui nodded and looked at him with hazy eyes. A smile appeared on her beautiful face. "You are still as calm and wise as before. No matter what kind of conspiracy, it can't escape your eyes." At this moment, Yunyao shook her head and said anxiously, "No. Tianqing, it's not like that. The Divine Master wanted to possess me, but she..." Without waiting for her to finish speaking, Luo Shui frowned. He waved his hands and shot out 2 rays of divine light, suppressing Yunyao. Suddenly, Yunyao's voice disappeared and she could not say another word. Even her head was frozen. She could no longer move or change her expression. Only her eyes remained clear, revealing an anxious expression. Seeing Luo Shui's reaction and how she was so weak that she could collapse at any time, Ji Tianqing frowned. He could tell that things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. At this moment, Luo Shui staggered behind Yunyao and raised her palms again. She released the white light of her divine soul and injected it into Yunyao's mind. As the divine white light quickly dissipated, her expression became uglier and uglier. Her aura became weaker and weaker, like a candle in the wind. Ji Tianqing's pupils constricted. He finally saw through the clues and shouted angrily, "Stop! Luo Shui, are you crazy? You actually stripped your own divine soul and merged it with Yunyao's divine soul. What are you trying to do?" He finally understood that Luo Shui was not possessing Yunyao. Instead, she was merging her own divine soul with Yunyao's divine soul. In this way, Yunyao would be able to obtain her divine soul's memories and strength. As for herself, she would vanish like smoke into thin air, completely vanishing. Ji Tianqing could not figure out why Luo Shui would do this. The situation was critical. He did not have time to think about the reason and immediately wanted to stop Luo Shui. However, Luo Shui shouted in a low voice, "Stop! Tianqing, don't act rashly. My divine soul and Yunyao's are connected. If you forcefully stop me, I will die with her." Indeed, Luo Shui could detonate her and Yunyao's divine souls with a single thought. Both of them would die. Ji Tianqing did not dare to act rashly. He could only stand below the high platform and look at the two of them anxiously. "Luo Shui. Why do you have to do this? Yunyao has already broken through to the divine realm. We will soon be able to take revenge on the heaven-punishing clan. What you have lost, you will soon be able to take back." Why do you have to do this? He could not stop Luo Shui and could only persuade her. Luo Shui shook her head and sighed as she cast a spell to strip her divine soul. It's too late to say this now. Since 30 years ago, when I carried out that plan, the mistakes have already begun. I sent Gu Daoxian to investigate in the Tianxian continent and found Yun Yao, who died at birth. I used the Neptunian divine pearl to revive her. From then on, I gave Yun Yao a new life and nurtured her as a substitute. I am already a martial god. My divine path foundation and divine abilities have already been set. I cannot fuse with the divine pearl. Therefore, I need Yun Yao to fuse with the divine pearl and cultivate the body of the goddess of Yaoguang. A few months ago, I entered the cemetery of the gods and found a strand of divine soul memory in the tomb of the goddess of Yaoguang. I successfully refined it. I have the memories of the goddess of Yaoguang. After Yun Yao broke through to the divine realm, she has the body of the goddess of Yaoguang. As long as I possess Yun Yao, I can fuse with her and become the reincarnation of the goddess of Yaoguang. Furthermore, I can fulfill my wish of 1,000 years and become your wife. Before she dissipated, Luo Shui no longer hid the truth and told Ji Tianqing the truth. Only then did Ji Tianqing understand the cause and effect of everything. Many things that had puzzled him in the past suddenly became clear. Luo Shui revealed a gentle smile. Her eyes were blurred as she said, Tianqing, in your previous life, you were obsessed with the way of the sword and didn't understand romance. You were also neither close nor distant to me. However, I don't hate you, nor do I blame you. In this life, I don't want to miss out on you again. I don't want to leave any regrets. Therefore, I really want to become Yun Yao and accompany you with another identity. Unfortunately, you have 2 children. The 2 most special and intelligent children in this world. I have already made a mistake. There is no turning back. I also don't have the face to face you. Since I can't possess Yun Yao and can't hurt the 2 children in you, I can only sacrifice myself. When Luo Shui said this, more than 90% of her soul had already dissipated. Her entire body ignited with blazing white flames. Her body was disintegrating, turning into strands of 5-colored spiritual energy that returned to the world. She smiled and said with a serene expression, Tianqing, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for my selfishness. From now on, my soul's memories will fuse with Yun Yao's soul. I will be a part of her. Although there is no more Luo Shui in this world, I can accompany you forever by existing in this way. We will be together forever. Her voice echoed in the cave. The flames burning all over her body became more and more violent. Her body gradually became transparent and blurry. After a few breaths, her divine body completely turned into spiritual light and completely dissipated. In the cave, only Ji Tianqing, who was standing in a daze with a complicated expression, and Yun Yao, who was filled with grief and tears in her eyes, were left. End of this chapter. Chapter 2468. As millions of spiritual lights merged into the world, Luo Shui completely disappeared. From then on, there was no such person in the world. Silence was restored in the cave. Ji Tianqing stood below the high platform in a daze. His expression was complicated, and his heart was heavy and sorrowful. He had never thought that everything was developing in a good direction. He had already seen the dawn of hope, but in the end, he was greeted with such a painful blow. In his mind, he could not help but recall the various things that happened between him and Luo Shui in his previous life. Countless scenes flashed through his mind like flashes of lightning. At that time, he was as cold as an iceberg and as unromantic as a block of wood. He was only grateful for Luo Shui's help and treated her as a trustworthy friend. Therefore, after he became a god, he would guide and help Luo Shui. Although he also knew that Luo Shui had always had feelings for him and silently accompanied him. However, he had no romantic feelings for Luo Shui. What he yearned for was the vast starry sky, the supreme path of godhood, the ultimate meaning of martial arts and life. The only thing he did not have was romantic love. Therefore, when he left the five elements world and ascended to the upper realm, he did not think of taking Luo Shui with him. However, he did not expect that after his rebirth in this life, Luo Shui still did not change her heart. She endured the torment of longing alone, swallowed the bitter fruit that she had created, and sacrificed her life to end all of this. In the end, it evolved into such an outcome. Sigh. The ill-fated relationship of the previous life, the debt of this life. Ji Tianqing sighed silently, feeling a little sad. After all, Luo Shui did not let him down in the slightest. She did not cross the line, abandon her conscience, and hurt him, Yin Yao, and the two children. At this point it was useless to say anything more. What will come sooner or later. Fate always plays tricks on people. Perhaps, the choice she made was the best result. This thought flashed through his mind. Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and walked to the top of the high platform. At the same time, Yin Yao's consciousness gradually blurred and she fainted. Luo Shui's soul and memories were completely integrated into her soul, and the two were quickly fusing. This had a great impact on Yin Yao's soul, causing her to fall into a coma. Ji Tianqing quickly arrived in front of her and looked at her worriedly, releasing his divine sense to check her situation. Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that she was not injured and that the two children were safe and sound. He hurriedly used a secret technique to deactivate the many divine formations on the high platform. Soon, the hundreds of rope-like divine lights were withdrawn. Swish! Swish! After the divine light dissipated, Yin Yao was freed and regained her freedom. Her divine power circulated naturally, protecting her mind and divine soul. This way, her divine soul would fuse with Luo Shui's divine soul and goddess Yaoguang's memories, and her life would not be in danger. She sat motionlessly on the high platform with her eyes closed. Her body was glowing with a faint white light. Ji Tianqing knew that this process would not be short and would take a long time. Therefore, he sat beside Yin Yao and silently protected her. 3 days passed in a flash. That evening, on the ancient viewing platform, a graceful woman with a head of white hair wearing an ivory white dress was standing by the jade railing, quietly looking at the sea of clouds in front of her. She was Fairy Yuqing. Even though she had changed into clean and tidy clothes and combed her hair, she did not look any different. However, her injuries had not healed. There were still numerous wounds all over her body, and her strength was also quite weak. She looked at the sea of clouds that flowed quietly in the sky and sighed with a bleak expression. Sigh. Luo Shui, you are still the silly girl that I know. No matter how firm your attitude was before, no matter how decisive you are still a kind person. You could not cross your conscience and bottom line, so you still sacrificed yourself to help them. Oh, if I had known this would happen, how could I have let you go to this step? Fairy Yuqing sighed to herself, her tone sorrowful and bleak. Gusts of cold wind blew, blowing at her waist-length white hair and clothes, adding to her desolate aura. At this time, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky above the ancient viewing platform and gradually became clear. The tall and burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. There is no kindness on the path to immortality, and the 9 heavens are the most ruthless. Is it the 7 emotions and 6 desires that cause people to fall, or is it only by severing emotions that one can ascend to heaven? The messenger of the divine ruins muttered in a bleak tone. His voice was low and hoarse, but it had the charm of seeing through the prosperity of the world, and his heart was as calm as water. You're here. Fairy Yuqing did not turn around. She was still facing the sea of clouds and greeted him. The messenger of the divine ruins did not respond. After a moment of silence, he asked, Your most beloved disciple died because of him, do you hate him? Fairy Yuqing shook her head and said calmly, This is Luo Shui's own choice, I have no right to hate him. The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and asked again, this matter is over, what are you going to do? Fairy Yuqing smiled bitterly and said desolately, naturally, I will return to the heavenly sea, stay in jade clear heaven, and wait for the end of my life to return to heaven and earth. Are you really going to extinguish the last glimmer of hope? The messenger of the divine ruins asked in a playful tone, that little girl has inherited everything of the ancient goddess. Perhaps in 10 years, she will be able to break the seal and change heaven and earth. Fairy Yuqing was stunned for a moment. After a long silence, she replied, if that's the case, then you and I both have a chance to leave this cage. Perhaps we don't have to turn into bones and sand. But don't forget, now that the continent is being invaded by foreign enemies, it's unknown whether she can withstand this calamity. The messenger of the divine ruins said in a playful tone, perhaps, you and I can join forces and help her. It can be considered as seeking a chance of survival for us and for this world. Fairy Yuqing smiled playfully and asked, you and I are both otherworldly people, how can we interfere in the grudges of the world? Otherworldly people? The messenger of the divine ruins said in a self-deprecating tone, being trapped here and not even having the right to leave, how can you talk about being otherworldly? Moreover, this is not a grudge of the human world, but an invasion of foreign enemies. I think this should be an opportunity. Pausing for a moment, he said in a serious and solemn tone, last chance. Fairy Yuqing frowned and remained silent. After a long time, when the figure of the messenger of the divine ruins gradually blurred and was about to disappear, she nodded slightly and said, in that case, I will believe you this time. The figure of the messenger of the divine ruins became clear again and his tone was filled with relief. He nodded and said, that's good. Then you don't have to return to the heavenly sea, just wait here. I have already deduced the secrets of heaven and predicted the future. Within 3 days, the great calamity will descend. At that time, life and death will depend on this. End of chapter. Chapter 2469. Within 3 days. The Great Tribulation is coming. Even though Fairy Yuqing's heart was as calm as still water, she could not help but change her expression. She had never thought that the Great Tribulation would come so quickly. However, she knew that the old man of the divine ruins had to consume his lifespan when he used a secret technique to pry into the secrets of the heavens. The results and future that he deduced were not absolutely correct, but they were not far from the truth. The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and said earnestly, so, you only have 3 days left. Heal your injuries as soon as possible. After saying that, he turned and left, disappearing into the sky. Fairy Yuqing frowned slightly. After thinking for a moment, she sat on the ancient viewing platform and began to heal her injuries. 3 days passed quickly. During this period of time, Ji Tianqing had been guarding by Yunyao's side, not leaving her side at all. Yunyao had also been unconscious. The two souls in her mind were still fusing quickly. Her entire body was still shining with a dense white light. As her aura continued to strengthen, it also became more mysterious. Ji Tianqing saw that her condition was stable and there was no danger, so he was relieved and at ease. It was already noon. The sky around the ancient viewing platform was covered by dark clouds and was as dark as ever. Suddenly, the wind blew in the sky. A biting cold wind blew in from the south, bringing with it a vast expanse of gray clouds, rolling towards the north. The cold wind was bone-piercingly cold and violent. It even carried a trace of faintly discernible killing intent. After a while, the gray clouds in the sky thousands of miles around the ancient viewing platform were blown away. The sun shone down from the sky, but it was not warm at all. Swoosh! Suddenly, a black light lit up in the sky in the south. It streaked across the sky like lightning and sped towards the ancient viewing platform. In the blink of an eye, the black light arrived near the ancient viewing platform and stopped. After the black light faded, a huge pitch-black battleship with a ferocious appearance appeared. This battleship was thousands of feet long and emitted a cold killing intent and an invisible suppressive force. There were several patterns engraved on the side of the battleship. They were mysterious and not complicated, but they exuded a domineering and majestic aura. Without a doubt, this was the battleship of the Heaven Slayer race. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of metal clashing, the door of the battleship opened. A tall pitch-black figure stepped out of the cabin door. It was a huge half-human, half-beast monster. His entire body was as black as ink, and his body was covered in black scales. 2 balls of purple flames danced in his large eyes. The most eye-catching thing was the 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders. They were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, looking extremely ferocious. With such a unique physique and appearance, no matter which world it was in, it would attract attention and leave a deep impression. Clearly, he was the leader of the heaven-conquering army, the dragon-subduing general. Following closely behind General Dragon Subduing was a demon race expert who was 20 feet tall and was covered in black dragon scales. This person was wearing a sturdy and heavy black armor. He had a bald head covered in tattoos, and he held a pitch-black demonic blade in his wide hand. His eyes were like copper bells, flashing with a frightening cold light. His entire body was emitting a powerful and domineering demonic aura. Even though he was following closely behind General Dragon Fu, his aura and posture were obviously weaker than General Dragon Fu's. But if General Dragon Fu was not present, he would be the most domineering existence present. This newly ascended demon god was the former great demon saint, Ling Xian. Other than General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian, there were 8 other heaven-conquering army captains in silver armor who walked out of the cabin door in succession. They were like 8 loyal guards, following closely behind General Dragon Fu. Swoosh! General Dragon Fu stepped out of the battleship and came to the sky above the ancient viewing platform. He looked down at the ancient viewing platform from above, and his gaze landed on Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing had long seen the battleship approaching and had sensed the dangerous aura. She had already ended her cultivation. She still sat on the platform with a calm expression, looking indifferently at General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The 2 parties stared at each other for a moment, not revealing any hostility or killing intent. But the atmosphere between heaven and earth quietly became oppressive. Even the air seemed to have frozen. General Dragon Fu finally spoke. He asked Fairy Yuqing in broken human language, "I see the shadow and aura of Luo Shui martial god on you. What is your relationship with Luo Shui martial god?" For nearly 3,000 years, Luo Shui had been known as the #1 beauty of the Shenwu continent. Her appearance and temperament were unparalleled. However, in the era 6,000 years ago, Fairy Yuqing had also been a peerless fairy who had swept the world and attracted the hearts of millions of men. Even though she was now old and in her twilight years, her beauty was still unparalleled, and her temperament was elegant and outstanding. Fairy Yuqing glanced at General Dragon Fu and said calmly, "I am Luo Shui's master. If I'm not wrong, you must be General Dragon Fu of the heaven-conquering army, right?" General Dragon Fu was stunned and said in surprise, "Luo Shui's master? She actually has a master. And she's still alive." Ling Xian, who was standing behind him, quickly explained, "General, you may not know this, but according to the rumors circulating in my clan, Luo Shui does indeed have a master. However, her master was a peerless fairy from 5,000 years ago. Later on, she lived in seclusion overseas and never cared about worldly affairs. Looking at this white-haired woman's strength and appearance, she should be Luo Shui's master." General Dragon Fu nodded slightly and stared coldly at Fairy Yuqing. He sneered, "A person who lives in seclusion who doesn't care about worldly affairs has actually appeared here and guessed my identity. It looks like Luo Shui has already told you. Let me ask you, where is Luo Shui hiding? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill you as a sacrifice." Fairy Yuqing looked at him expressionlessly and said slowly, "Luo Shui has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth. She didn't tell me anything about you. It's just that you're so ugly, and in the entire Shinwu continent, you can't find a monster as ugly as you. That's why I was able to guess your identity with a single glance. Her tone was very calm, without the slightest bit of anger, as if she was stating a fact. However, the more she was like this, the angrier General Dragon Fu became, and his eyes surged with killing intent. Old woman. You're challenging my bottom line. Are you courting death? Speak quickly. Where is Luo Shui? Fairy Yuqing spoke again. I've already said that she has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth. Impossible. General Dragon Subduing didn't believe this news at all. He shouted coldly without hesitation. Ling Xian also shouted angrily, Old woman, you still have the nerve to say such a clumsy lie. Luo Shui was one of the 3 martial gods. Besides General Dragon Fu, who else could have killed her? Fairy Yuqing shook her head lightly and said indifferently, when did I say that she was killed? She killed herself. Hearing this, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian both frowned and looked at each other doubtfully. End of chapter. Chapter 2470. A few days ago, General Long Fu had used a secret technique to detect that there were powerful fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God. He knew that martial god Tianju had been killed, and the ancestral god Fiend had also fallen. Martial god Taihao had been severely injured and must have hidden away to recuperate. There were only a few martial gods left in the Shinwu continent. Therefore, the fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God were most likely related to Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Therefore, General Long Fu had brought Ling Xian and the other captains to the ruins of God as quickly as possible. This time, he wanted to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui in the ruins of God to completely end the war. As long as Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui were dead, no one would be able to resist the invasion and rule of the Heaven Punisher. General Long Fu was here to fight. However, he had not expected to see Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui after arriving at the ruins of God. Instead, he saw a white-haired woman. The white-haired woman claimed to be Luo Shui's master and said that Luo Shui had committed suicide. General Long Fu could not accept this result. He temporarily suppressed his anger and killing intent and stared at Fairy Yuqing with a sharp gaze. He continued to ask, Old woman, I'll ask you one more thing. Where is Ji Tianqing? This is your last chance. If you hide anything from me, kill me. Fairy Yuqing glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth curled into a contemptuous sneer. She slowly stood up and said indifferently, I don't know Ji Tianqing, so how would I know where he is? After getting this answer, General Long Fu's patience was exhausted, and he truly wanted to kill her. Very good. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. With that, General Long Fu waved his hand and ordered, kill her. The 8 silver-armored captains drew their swords and sabers. After roaring, they pounced toward Fairy Yuqing with murderous intent. Swish. 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 Everyone attacked from all directions. At the same time, they waved their swords and sabers, slashing out bloody blades that blotted out the sky and earth, releasing an invisible pressure. Suddenly, the ancient viewing platform with a radius of 5 kilometers was drowned in the light of swords and sabers. Fairy Yuqing was under the light blades that filled the sky. She was under great pressure and her eyes became solemn. Even though the captains were only at the 2nd or 3rd level of the martial god realm, they were still able to defeat the captains. Usually, Fairy Yuqing did not take them seriously at all. She could easily defeat and kill them. However, there were as many as 8 captains, and their teamwork was flawless. In addition, Fairy Yuqing had not recovered from her serious injuries and only had about 60% of her strength left. Faced with the full power of the 8 captains, she had no choice but to be cautious and give it her all. She didn't hold back at all. She summoned the sea god's shield without hesitation and poured her divine power into it. Instantly, the sea god's shield expanded to the size of a mountain, releasing an icy blue radiance that soared into the sky. Bang 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 bang. The crimson blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth viciously struck the sea god's shield, resulting in a series of earth-shattering booms. The divine shield trembled unceasingly. Cold light burst out and emitted a dull buzzing sound. However, the 8 captains were unable to break through the divine shield's defense even after several consecutive attacks. Under the protection of the divine shield, Fairy Yuqing was safe and sound. She formed hand seals with both hands and activated the sea god's shield to spin rapidly. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The spikes and blades at the edge of the divine shield immediately released thousands of icy blue light blades and spears, piercing fiercely toward the 8 captains. Instantly, the icy blue light exploded and tore through the sky, dazzling and eye-catching. Faced with such a powerful attack, the 8 captains' expressions were solemn as they desperately waved their swords and sabers to block. Boom 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 boom. Another deafening boom erupted, reverberating endlessly in the sky. Although the 8 captains joined forces to block the light blades and ice spears, they were under great pressure. However, the pressure on them was extremely great, and they were all shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. Some of them were even injured, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Seeing this scene, General Dragon Subduing frowned and said coldly, "Damn old woman, she is indeed stronger than Luo Shui." Obviously, it was difficult for the 8 captains to complete their mission, let alone kill Fairy Yuqing. Thus, General Dragon Subduing ordered the battleship high in the sky, fire the cannons and turn her into ashes. There were 6 captains and dozens of heaven-punishing race warriors guarding the battleship. After receiving the order, everyone immediately activated the battleship's array formation. Ka 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 ka. The metal plate on the side of the battleship opened, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Dark red light lit up in them, brewing a power that could destroy the world. Boom! In the next moment, the hundreds of cannon muzzles suddenly spewed out dark red flames that were as red as blood. The blood-red divine flames condensed into hundreds of light pillars that fiercely blasted toward Fairy Yuqing on the ancient viewing platform. Instantly, the world within 1,000 miles was illuminated by the flames. A destructive aura enveloped the entire area, erupting with an unparalleled oppressive force. Fairy Yuqing, who was on the ancient viewing platform, felt a great pressure and danger. Her eyes were filled with shock and anger. She had a faint premonition that with her strength and the sea god's shield, she would not be able to block the bombardment of the battleship. Hundreds of blood-red light pillars descended from the sky and were about to drown Fairy Yuqing. At this critical moment, a burly black figure suddenly appeared in the sky and let out a deep and majestic roar. "How dare you behave so atrociously in my territory? You must be tired of living." The burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. He raised his arms and waved his wide sleeves. His right palm was like a blade as it slashed toward the sky. Boom! In an instant, a dazzling white divine light ruthlessly split open the sky, creating a pitch-black crack that was hundreds of miles long. And this huge spatial crack was right above the ancient viewing platform. The hundreds of blood-red light pillars were blocked by the spatial crack. They fiercely blasted into the pitch-black void and disappeared on the spot. Immediately after, the messenger of the divine ruins waved his left palm and sent out a golden divine light that covered the sky and earth. It turned into 8 divine dragon phantoms that blasted toward the 8 silver-armored captains. Boom 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 boom. With a series of muffled sounds, the 8 captains were caught off guard and were all blasted away by the divine dragon phantoms. They spat out mouthfuls of blood. All of this took a long time to describe, but it happened in the blink of an eye. As soon as the messenger of the divine ruins appeared, he only used 2 moves to resolve Fairy Yuqing's crisis and injured the 8 captains. General Long Fu and Ling Xian were stunned for a moment. They turned to look at the messenger of the divine ruins at the same time, their eyes filled with caution. Without a doubt, both of them could see that the messenger of the divine ruin's strength and methods were stronger than Fairy Yuqing's. Fairy Yuqing came back to her senses and looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated gaze. She asked, "Old man, you clearly hid your strength before. You deliberately let me win." A few months ago, she had brought Luo Shui to the divine ruins and defeated the messenger of the divine ruins, allowing Luo Shui to enter the cemetery of the gods. This made her think that her strength was slightly stronger than the messenger of the divine ruins. But now she realized that the truth was not what she thought. End of chapter. Chapter 2471. Fairy Yuqing and the messenger of the divine ruins had known each other for thousands of years. At that time, their relationship was neither close nor far. There was no grudge between them, nor was there a deep friendship between them. Until thousands of years later, the few remaining martial gods of that era passed away one after another. The two of them became the oldest and only two surviving martial gods. From then on, there was a sense of mutual appreciation between the two of them. Now that Fairy Yuqing understood the truth, she guessed the messenger of the divine ruins' thoughts. He had long been unwilling to be trapped here and wanted to unlock the world seal to find a chance to ascend to the upper realm. Thinking of this, Fairy Yuqing looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated expression. She thought to herself, this old fellow deliberately hid his strength and had the idea of leaving the cage long ago. He must have made preparations long ago. He has guarded the divine ruins for thousands of years and most likely obtained some benefits from the divine ruins. It's either a divine Dao inheritance or a divine artifact. Just as Fairy Yuqing was guessing, General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian attacked. The two of them used their ultimate skills at the same time and punched out dozens of bloody fist shadows, releasing overwhelming demonic fire that poured toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The messenger of the divine ruins hurriedly waved his palms and punched out palm shadows that collided with the dozens of fist shadows, creating a series of earth-shattering sounds. Bam! 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 Following a muffled explosion, the sky was shattered, revealing a large expanse of black space. The demonic fire that covered the sky drowned the messenger of the divine ruins like a flood. However, the black robe that the messenger of the divine ruins was wearing lit up with a dazzling sacred golden light, protecting him like a shield. No matter how much the demonic fire attacked, it could not hurt him at all. Seeing this scene, Fairy Yuqing was enlightened and muttered to herself, I didn't notice it before, but now it seems that the black robe he's wearing is a divine artifact. General Dragon Subduing also frowned, and a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. The messenger of the divine ruins is actually so powerful. He can stand shoulder to shoulder with me. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Ling Xian beside him. Ling Xian, why didn't you say so earlier? Ling Xian explained awkwardly, Lord General, please calm down. I have never come into contact with the emissary of the ruins of God before, so I do not know his true strength. Dragon Subduing General glared at him angrily but didn't say anything. After that, General Dragon Subduing sent a voice transmission to the captain and soldiers on the warship. Leave this place immediately and search for Luo Shui and Ji Tianqing. Upon receiving his order, the warship immediately flew away and began to search the surrounding mountains. The Dragon Subduing General and Ling Xian joined forces to attack the emissary of the divine ruins. The 8 silver-armored captains regained their composure and attacked Fairy Yuqing with all their might. The two sides fought fiercely high in the sky, and it was difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. At the same time, several thousand li away from the ancient viewing platform. In the cave deep underground, Yunyao was still sleeping. Her soul was still fusing. Ji Tianqing stayed by her side, quietly waiting for her to complete the fusion. But at this moment, divine power fluctuations came from outside the cave, accompanied by deafening explosions. The cave's protective array shook from the shockwaves and lit up with dazzling divine light. Ji Tianqing was immediately awakened. He quickly got up and left the cave. He quietly flew out of the ground and hid in the sky. In the direction of the ancient viewing platform, layers of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples. There were also loud rumbles and explosions that continued. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. With a gloomy expression, he muttered, "It's a battle between martial gods. Not only are there martial gods of the heaven-punishing race, there are also demon gods." Of course, he could see that there was demonic chi and bloody light in the soaring divine light thousands of li away. The continuous divine power fluctuations also contained the aura of the heaven-punishing race. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that the experts of the heaven-punishing race and the ancestor demon god had come. However, he was filled with doubts and thought to himself, the ancestor demon god is still alive. He was severely injured by my divine sword. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, he would be extremely weak. How could he recover his strength and make a comeback in such a short period of time? How could he be together with the martial gods of the heaven-punishing race? Even though Ji Tianqing racked his brains, he could not figure out the truth and reason. Therefore, he quietly flew across the sky and decided to go to the ancient viewing platform to see what was going on. However, he had only flown 1,000 li when he saw a black shadow as large as a mountain speeding toward him from the side. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the 3,000-meter-long black shadow flew past him and headed straight for the mountain peak where Yunyao was. The heaven-punishing race's battleship? Look at the symbol and insignia of the battleship. Could it be General Fu Long's battleship? Although the battleship was fast, it could not escape Ji Tianqing's detection. He turned around without hesitation and chased after the battleship. A moment later, when he caught up to the battleship, it had also stopped above the mountain. Obviously, the captains on the battleship had used divine arrays and special methods to detect the divine arrays and caves underground. The battleship stopped in the sky. After a moment of hesitation, it opened the metal deck on the side, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Hundreds of cannon muzzles were aimed at the underground cave, and dark red light was brewing in them. The cave where Yunyao was about to be bombarded by the battleship. Once the light pillars came down, a deep pit with a radius of a few hundred li would be blasted into the ground. The underground cave would also be greatly damaged. Yunyao would definitely be affected and her life would be in danger. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing stepped forward without hesitation. He waved the burial of heaven and slashed out a sword light that was thousands of li long. Sky-splitting sword. The giant golden sword that was thousands of li long struck the giant battleship with endless power. With a loud boom, the huge warship was sent flying on the spot, tumbling hundreds of miles away. The giant golden sword shattered on the spot, bursting into golden fragments that covered the sky and scattered in the sky. The battleship was sent flying hundreds of li away before it dissipated the impact and stopped in the sky. There was a 3-inch deep dent in the battleship that was about 100 meters long where the giant sword had struck it. This was only a light injury to the battleship. It would not affect its normal operation or battle. The captains on the warship and the many soldiers of the Heaven Punisher race were still in a state of shock and fear. Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing in the sky. When they saw his appearance, they immediately cried out in surprise. "It's Ji Tianqing. That's right, it's him. Ha ha ha. Lord General guessed correctly. Ji Tianqing is really here. Kill him. Kill him quickly, and we'll be able to obtain the greatest merit. Everyone, don't be rash. That kid is very powerful. He can even kill the ancestral fiend god. Our top priority is to report this to the general." End of chapter. Chapter 2472. The captains had different opinions. Some people were wild with joy. They only wanted to kill Ji Tianqing immediately and obtain the first-class merit. Some were cautious and suggested reporting the news to the dragon-subduing general first. However, they quickly finished their discussion and reached a consensus. One of the captains sent a message to the dragon-subduing general. The other 3 captains controlled the battleship and released hundreds of blood-colored light pillars towards Ji Tianqing. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, hundreds of light pillars shot out like a rainbow that streaked across the sky and enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure. The captains were all confident and full of anticipation as they stared at the sky without blinking. They thought that no matter how strong Ji Tianqing was, he wouldn't be able to block the bombardment of the dragon-subduing battleship. However, the next scene made everyone dumbfounded. When the blood-colored light pillars engulfed Ji Tianqing, his figure disappeared into thin air. He had become one with the vast heaven and earth. His aura was still in this heaven and earth, but his divine body no longer existed. It was as if he was the heaven and earth, and the heaven and earth were him. Boom! The hundreds of blood-colored light pillars missed and slammed into the barren land, creating an earth-shattering explosion. Instantly, 2 mountains that were thousands of feet tall were blasted into powder. The ground within a 500-mile radius was also blasted into a huge pit like an abyss. Endless smoke and dust rose into the air, obscuring the sky and the sun. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, causing the ground within a radius of 3,000 miles to tremble. Such destructive power was truly terrifying. However, the captains knew that this attack had missed and didn't hurt Ji Tianqing. Even the cave they had discovered earlier wasn't damaged. After all, that cave was a few hundred miles away from the huge pit. The captains looked at each other. For the time being, they were at a loss of what to do. That brat Ji Tianqing is hiding. What should we do? Find a way to find him. Why don't we ignore Ji Tianqing and destroy that cave first? Yes. There's something strange about that cave. It must be related to Ji Tianqing. After discussing for a while, everyone immediately came up with an idea. Thus, the battleship flew towards the cave and accumulated a large amount of power, preparing to fire. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, who was the embodiment of heaven and earth, was instantly enraged. Killing intent surged in his heart. These heaven crushers are despicable and deserve to die. Through observing the reaction of the battleship, he guessed that only the captain of the Heaven Punisher race was on the battleship. General Dragon Subduing was not there. After all, given the dragon subduing general's strength, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He could just fight him head-on. Soon, the hundreds of cannons on the side of the warship began to accumulate dark red light. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to take out the god-slaying flying dagger. He used his divine psyche to control the flying dagger and stabbed it towards the battleship. Swish! The 3-inch-long god-slaying flying dagger streaked across the sky with a resplendent golden light. In a quarter of an instant, the flying dagger pierced the side of the warship. At this moment, the flying knife suddenly expanded thousands of times, turning into a dark golden giant blade that was hundreds of feet long. Boom! Crack! The dark golden giant blade pierced the side of the battleship. There was an earth-shattering explosion, and black metal shrapnel filled the sky. More than 30 cannons on the side of the battleship were shattered or cut off by the flying dagger. A 100-meter-long gap appeared on the hull of the battleship, and the situation inside could be clearly seen. Ji Tianqing even saw the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship through the large gap. Their faces were filled with shock. The berserk and unparalleled force of impact once again sent the warship flying, tumbling tens of li away. The remaining dozens of cannons continued to shoot out dark red light beams. However, the direction of those dozens of light pillars deviated and actually blasted towards the sky. The plan of the captains was once again foiled by Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to attack the battleship. He swung his sword, sending out cold light beams toward the gap in the battleship. At the same time, he used his divine psyche to control the god-slaying flying dagger to attack the battleship from the side. Swish! 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 More than 30 sharp sword lights pierced through the gap in the battleship and pierced into the battleship, accurately piercing a dozen Heaven Punisher warriors. With a series of muffled explosions, the dozen or so heaven-punishing warriors exploded into clouds of blood mist and disintegrated on the spot. The surviving Heaven Punisher warriors roared in fear and cursed angrily. The captains were also flustered. They hurriedly piloted the battleship to counterattack. However, before they could attack, Ji Tianqing teleported behind the battleship. Whoosh! The god-slaying flying dagger appeared out of thin air, pierced through the gap in the battleship and charged into the battleship. Swish! 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 In just a few breaths, the god-slaying flying dagger flew around the battleship and pierced through a dozen metal walls, instantly killing more than 30 Heaven Punisher warriors. Even one of the captains could not dodge in time. His legs were cut off by the god-slaying flying dagger. In an instant, cries of agony filled the battleship, and blood splattered everywhere. The four captains could not be bothered to deal with Ji Tianqing. They could only desperately block the god-slaying flying dagger. However, at that moment, Ji Tianqing swung the Burial of Heaven sword again and struck the battleship. Boom! Crack! With a loud boom, the battleship was sent flying 300 miles away. It rolled and crashed into a valley. Boom! With a loud boom, the valley was blasted into a deep abyss. The surrounding mountains were also flattened, leaving behind a scene of desolation. Smoke and dust that covered the sky drifted down and covered the entire battleship. The previously mysterious, majestic, and ferocious battleship was now covered in scars and deformed. At first glance, the 10,000-foot-long battleship looked like scrap metal. The god-slaying flying dagger had basically killed all the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship. The remaining four captains had also been injured by the god-slaying flying dagger. They were fleeing in panic. They had to accept reality. This battleship with powerful defenses was no longer a safe fortress. Instead, it was a cage that prevented them from escaping and trapped them. Helpless, the four captains could only abandon the battleship and flee. Swish! 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 The four of them opened the cabin door and fled the battleship. They turned into streaks of blood-red light and flew into the sky. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who was guarding above the ruins, charged over with his sword. Ha ha ha! I was waiting for you to walk right into my trap. Ji Tianqing sneered. He waved his sword in his right hand and sent out dozens of sword beams. His left hand struck out with a dragon claw as large as a mountain. Bam! 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 3 captains were stabbed by the sword beams. A series of muffled sounds rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4th captain was hit by the illusory dragon claw. He fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. His body cracked open, and blood spurted out. Without the protection of the battleship, the 4 captains were immediately severely injured. They were in imminent danger. End of chapter. Chapter 2473. Sword Rain. Ji Tianqing pointed his sword at the sky and shouted coldly. In the next instant, tens of thousands of star swords descended from the sky. The 4 injured silver-armored captains looked up at the meteor-like swords and felt a chill run down their spines. Their eyes were filled with despair. An extremely heavy force suppressed them, giving them no chance to escape. At this critical moment, they could only use their last bit of strength to resist with all their might. Boom! 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 The star swords covered a radius of hundreds of miles and produced earth-shattering sounds. The stars were dazzling, and dust filled the sky. The loud sounds were endless, and the ground within thousands of miles was trembling. The 4 silver-armored captains endured the attacks of countless star swords and were quickly reduced to ashes. 10 seconds later, when all the star swords dissipated, the 4 captains also ceased to exist. Without any hesitation, Ji Tianqing rushed into the underground cave as fast as a bolt of lightning. The 2 divine arrays protecting the cave had already been damaged to varying degrees and were not far from being destroyed. Fortunately, the interior of the cave was still intact, and Yunyao was safe. Ji Tianqing hurriedly opened the sword world and put the sleeping Yunyao inside. Only then could Yunyao be considered safe. He turned and left the cave, crossing the sky and flying toward the ancient viewing platform. Dozens of seconds later, Ji Tianqing arrived near the ancient viewing platform. He was still hundreds of miles away, but he could already see the colorful divine light in the distant sky covering thousands of miles. A few figures were flickering in and out of the divine light, shuttling back and forth. Among the 3 people closest to him, one was a tall and burly elder in a black robe. He was the messenger of the divine ruins. As for the other 2, one was the ferocious-looking General Dragon Fu, who was as large as a mountain. There was also a bald man from the demon race. He was the great demon sage, Ling Xian, whose appearance had changed greatly. General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian were attacking the messenger of the divine ruins. From the looks of it, the messenger of the divine ruins was at a disadvantage. He was covered in injuries and bloodstains, looking somewhat pathetic. The dragon-subduing general and Ling Xian had the upper hand, but it wasn't easy for them. Both of them had suffered heavy injuries, especially Ling Xian's injuries. In the short term, it would be difficult to determine the victor between the 2 sides. It wasn't an easy task for General Dragon subduing and Ling Xian to kill the emissary of the divine ruins. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, revealing a deep sense of doubt. Why is General Dragon subduing and Ling Xian together? Join forces to deal with the old man of the godly ruins. In a short 2 months, how did Ling Xian break through the deity realm and become a fiend celestial? Ling Xian's divine soul aura was actually very similar to the ancestral devil gods. Could it be that Ling Xian had rescued the ancestral demon god and seized the opportunity when the ancestral demon god was on the brink of death to steal the ancestral demon god's soul? Moreover, after Ling Xian became a demon god, he joined the dragon-subduing general. In a short moment, Ji Tianqing analyzed the answer. In his opinion, this was the only explanation that made sense. However, he still felt that this was too absurd. Ling Xian was the ancestral demon god's most trusted and most valued great fiend celestial, but in the end, he betrayed the ancestral demon god when he was on the brink of death. After that, Ling Xian turned around and joined the dragon-subduing general, making the fiend celestial race a vassal of the heaven punisher race. If the ancestral demon god was still alive, he would probably explode from anger even if he didn't die, right? Ji Tianqing thought to himself, the corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous sneer. He looked at the sky thousands of miles away, even further away. There, several captains in silver armor were desperately besieging a white-haired woman. Ji Tianqing's gaze immediately fell on the white-haired woman, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. Of course, he could recognize that the white-haired woman was the assassin who had attacked him previously. Before Luo Shui died, he had revealed the true identity of the white-haired woman. It was actually his master, Fairy Yuqing. Now, Fairy Yuqing was besieged by several captains of the Heaven Punisher race. Her injuries were very miserable, and she was in a precarious situation. Ji Tianqing could not help but think to himself, if Fairy Yuqing is willing to help Luo Shui stall for time, it means that she also knows of Luo Shui's plan. However, Luo Shui reined in a horse at the edge of the cliff and sacrificed himself. It has already been a few days, so Fairy Yuqing must know. But she actually doesn't blame me and doesn't seek revenge. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to fly over and help Fairy Yuqing. Swoosh! He arrived near the battlefield and appeared behind a silver-armored captain in a flash. Before the captain could react, he waved his sword and stabbed out 7 cold beams. Swish! 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 7 dazzling sword beams enveloped the captain like a bright moon. With a muffled bang, the captain was stabbed by the sword beams. His armor and body collapsed at the same time, exploding into a rain of blood. This sudden scene not only frightened the other captains, but also stunned Fairy Yuqing. When she saw that the person who attacked was Ji Tianqing, she also revealed a trace of surprise and her eyes became complicated. At this moment, the other captains came back to their senses and waved their long sabers and swords, surrounding Ji Tianqing. The pressure on Fairy Yuqing was greatly reduced. She hurriedly took out a few pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. Ji Tianqing used the Big Dipper Nebula steps and held the Burial of Heaven sword as he fought with the captains. The divine sword danced, constantly stabbing out dazzling sword beams. His left palm flew up and down, constantly striking out palm shadows and dragon claws that blotted out the sky, sending the captains flying one after another. In the dark, the god-slaying flying dagger remained invisible, lurking in the void, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Bang! 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 Swish! Swish! Loud sounds kept erupting, and the colorful sword beams and palm shadows covered hundreds of miles of the sky. In a short span of 10 breaths, 3 captains had been killed by the Heaven Burier sword, their bodies smashed into pieces. 2 other captains were smashed into meat paste by the heaven-capturing dragon claws and shattered into countless pieces. At this point, the 6 captains who besieged Fairy Yuqing were all killed by Ji Tianqing. Before Ji Tianqing arrived, Fairy Yuqing had already killed 2 captains. All 8 captains were dead, and the battle was over. Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword and flew to stand in front of Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing looked at him with a calm expression and asked, "I attacked you before, but you didn't care about the past and even helped me out." Ji Tianqing looked at her with a complicated gaze and said in a low voice, "Senior, Luo Shui has already told me the truth." Fairy Yuqing nodded slightly and asked again, "She couldn't get over herself and chose to sacrifice herself, right?" Ji Tianqing nodded silently with a bitter look on his face. Fairy Yuqing forced a smile and comforted, "You don't have to blame yourself, we should all respect her choice. Don't just stand there, the old man can't hold on any longer, we have to help him." With that, she flew towards the messenger of the ruins of God. Ji Tianqing also collected his thoughts and followed with the Burial of Heaven sword. End of chapter. The emissary of the divine ruins flew out of the black light fragment and staggered back into the sky. His appearance became even more miserable and disheveled. His black robe was full of holes, with more than a dozen pieces of cloth fluttering in the wind. Even the black cloak he was wearing was torn to shreds by the hurricane. Without the cover of the cloak, he revealed his true appearance. A wrinkled, bronze-skinned face appeared before everyone's eyes. His face was old but resolute, filled with a firm and unyielding expression. On his square face, there was a pair of thick eyebrows that were like dragons, and a pair of turbid eyes that were filled with wisdom and calmness. This was a face that was dignified without being angry, causing others to feel deep veneration. But the most eye-catching thing was that on the emissary of the divine ruins' forehead, there was a special diamond-shaped mark that was faintly discernible under a few strands of white hair. Suddenly seeing that strange-looking imprint, General Dragon Subduing frowned. Ling Xian was also stunned and let out a cry of disbelief. Heavens! You're actually not human. Indeed, the emissary of the divine ruins' appearance and body shape were no different from a human's. He had always been wearing a large black robe and a large cloak, which concealed his true appearance. As a result, no one in the world had ever seen his true appearance. Everyone thought that the emissary of the divine ruins was the martial god of the human race, the most mysterious human powerhouse. But now, his cloak had been destroyed and his true appearance had been revealed. Only then did everyone discover this secret. At this time, Fairy Yuqin rushed over with Ji Tianqing and arrived behind General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The two of them were about to attack General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian when they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Both of them were stunned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. Especially Fairy Yuqin. This scene had the greatest impact on her. She had always thought that she was the only one in the world who understood the emissary of the divine ruins the best. But now, she realized that she was wrong. She didn't understand the emissary of the divine ruins at all. She was even kept in the dark about whether the other party was a human or a foreign race. A strong sense of unfamiliarity rose from the bottom of her heart. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins, staring at the diamond-shaped mark on his forehead. For some reason, his long-dormant divine soul memories became blurred and chaotic again. His consciousness was temporarily in a trance and overlapped, and many strange and bizarre images appeared in his mind. Especially that strange diamond-shaped mark, which flashed through his mind more than 30 times in a single thought. There were golden ones, dark red ones, purple ones, blue ones, white ones, and even black ones. They were all diamond-shaped marks of various colors, and there were some changes on the marks, which made them even more mysterious. The sudden change caused a strong thought to emerge in Ji Tianqing's mind. I've seen this strange diamond-shaped mark somewhere before. Also, I should be very familiar with it. I've seen many different colored marks. What race is the person who has this kind of mark? He vaguely remembered some fragmented images, but he couldn't remember what they were. His divine soul memories kept surging, but it was difficult for a complete memory fragment to appear. Ji Tianqing knew very well that the divine soul memories of his previous life had yet to be fully awakened. There were even more secrets hidden in the depths of his divine soul memories, waiting for him to unearth and unravel them. At this moment, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came back to their senses. Their attention shifted from the emissary of the divine ruins and focused on Ji Tianqing. TSK. Ji Tianqing, you've indeed appeared. General Dragon Fu looked at him with a burning gaze, and a bloodthirsty sneer appeared on his face. Ling Xian also revealed a mocking sneer and said to Ji Tianqing, how have you been? Speaking of which, I still have to thank you properly. If you didn't severely injure the ancestor fiend god, how would I have the chance to replace it and become the new fiend god? General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came here to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Now that Ji Tianqing had appeared, the two of them naturally had to get down to business and didn't want to be entangled with the emissary of the divine ruins. After Ji Tianqing heard Ling Xian's words, he sneered with contempt. I didn't guess wrongly. The ancestor fiend god saw you as his right-hand man, but in the end, he was betrayed by you and his divine soul was taken over by you. The despicableness and savagery of the fiend god race are indeed of the same origin. Ling Xian was mocked by him, but he didn't feel embarrassed or angry. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, the winner takes all. I was able to take over the ancestor fiend god's power and replace it to become the new fiend god. That means that my scheming and methods are above it, and I'm more suitable to be the leader of the fiend god race. Old Tai, set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese Networko. Chapter 2475. Ling Xian's smug look made Ji Tianqing feel even more nauseous. He looked at Ling Xian from the corner of his eyes and said expressionlessly, the ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great fiend celestial and was once the death god that struck fear in the hearts of the 100 races. Although I hate it and want to kill it, I have to admit that it is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime fiend celestial. At least, it will never submit to others and will not let the entire fiend celestial race become the vassals and slaves of other races. Ling Xian heard the sarcasm in Ji Tianqing's words, and sneered disapprovingly. Ji Tianqing, no matter how strong a person is, he is still a cold corpse. Only the living have the right to talk about strength of character and dignity. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Now that the heaven punishers have swept the world and no one can stop them, General Dragon Subduing is the most majestic tree. Only by following in the footsteps of General Dragon Subduing can the fiend celestial race rule the world and be above the 100 races. And you and your fellow humans will suffer heavy casualties and become the slaves of the heaven punishers. Of course, you won't be able to see this. Because today, you are going to die and be buried here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. You have already explained very clearly what it means to be a dog relying on its master's power. Do you think that you have nothing to worry about and have a bright future just because you have General Dragon Subduing? Ha ha ha. Who knows if today is the day you die and this place is not your burial ground? Ling Xian frowned fiercely and his eyes shone with a fierce light. He said in a venomous tone, "It's useless to argue. I will kill you now." As he said that, Ling Xian raised the pitch-black demonic blade in his hand and activated the power of calamity, condensing a pitch-black blade light on the demonic blade. Fairy Yuqing stepped out and said to Ji Tianqing behind her, "Ji Tianqing, help the old man kill General Dragon Subduing. Leave this clown to me." Fairy Yuqing was about to activate the Sea God Shield and kill Ling Xian. General Dragon Subduing frowned and shouted coldly, "Today's matter is between Ji Tianqing and me. You two old things, if you back down now, I won't make things difficult for you." Suddenly hearing these words, everyone's expression changed slightly, and a wisp of light flashed in their eyes. This was especially true for Ling Xian. While his face was filled with astonishment, he thought to himself, "That's not right." The dragon subduing general had always been overbearing. Given his usual style, he would definitely kill all of them. But he actually took the initiative to concede? Could it be that General Fu Long admits that he is no match for Ji Tianqing, Fairy Yuqing, and the emissary of the ruins of God? At this moment, Fairy Yuqing sneered, the dignified leader of the heaven-punishing race is afraid? What a joke! Weren't you acting all high and mighty before and even wanted to kill this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui? Why don't you want to be my enemy now?" General Dragon Fu looked at her coldly and said in a low voice, "Since Luo Shui is dead, my only enemy left is Ji Tianqing. This matter has nothing to do with you." Fairy Yuqing straightened her wide sleeves and said slowly, "Nothing to do with it. Ji Tianqing and this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui, are best friends. If you want to kill Ji Tianqing, how can this old woman sit by and do nothing?" At this moment, the emissary of the ruins of God had already suppressed his injuries and took out a bronze mask to wear on his face. His voice was as low as muffled thunder, and he said in a dignified tone, "General Dragon Fu, put away your clumsy plan. You want to kill Ji Tianqing first, then deal with this old man and Fairy Yuqing. Ha ha ha, the people of the Shenwu continent are not that stupid. This old man and Fairy Yuqing are definitely not people who are afraid of death. Today, let's settle this here and now." The emissary of the ruins of God's words not only exposed General Dragon Fu's scheme, but also completely shattered his fantasies. General Dragon Fu knew that this matter would not be resolved peacefully, so he did not waste any more words. He smiled nastily and said, "Very well. Since you are so eager to die, then I will fulfill your wish." The moment he finished speaking, General Dragon Subduing slowly took out a thick and wide blood blade and swung it towards Ji Tianqing. Slaughter of the heavens. The huge blood blade that was 100 meters long lit up with a dazzling blood-red light, and thousands of mysterious images and symbols appeared on the blade. Swish, swish, swish. The blood blade instantly slashed out 4 huge blood-red blades that could split the heavens and earth apart, ruthlessly slashing toward Ji Tianqing. The blades were extremely sharp and carried a murderous aura that could shake one's soul. However, the most powerful thing that Ji Tianqing feared the most was the formless power that descended from the heavens. That was the essence of the Heaven Punisher's power. It could not be seen or touched, but it was as terrifying as the heavens and earth, making it difficult for one to even think of resisting. Ji Tianqing's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. General Dragon Fu was the strongest enemy he had ever faced in his life. He stared at the 4 blood-red blades and gripped the sword of burial of heaven tightly with both hands, exploding with 100% of his divine power. Sword piercing the heavens. With a furious roar, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and ruthlessly stabbed out a 1,000-meter-long divine sword light that pierced the heavens from below. Boom! Crack! The huge divine sword went against the formless oppressive power and went against the current, hitting one of the blood-red blades with a loud boom. With a deafening shattering sound, the blood-red blade shattered into pieces and scattered in the sky. Then, the huge divine sword, which had used up almost half of its power, ruthlessly stabbed the second blood-red blade. Boom! 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 The second blood-red blade also collapsed. However, the huge divine sword's power had been used up and it also shattered. However, General Dragon Fu still had 2 more blood-red blades that slashed toward Ji Tianqing with undiminished power. He had no time to counterattack and could only use his divine body to resist. At this critical moment, the messenger of the divine ruins brazenly attacked. Sky sea parting light, sun and moon shine together. The messenger of the divine ruins shouted in a solemn tone. His palms separated and interlocked, shooting out endless rainbow divine light that respectively struck the 2 blood-red blades. Boom! The rainbow divine light suddenly exploded, turning into billions of dazzling fragments that covered the sky. The 2 blood-red blades also shattered, turning into specks of blood-red light that dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins worked together to neutralize General Dragon Fu's divine power. General Dragon Fu was not surprised by this. In fact, he had already expected it. His expression did not change as he waved his blood-red blade again, piercing out blood-red light that filled the sky toward Ji Tianqing. His mountain-like body also released a vast and formless power that pressed down like the collapse of the heavens. Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins did not dare to relax. They both used their divine powers with all their might to block and counterattack. At the same time, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian also started fighting. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand in the sky. Originally, Ling Xian only wanted to join forces with General Dragon Fu to kill Ji Tianqing as soon as possible and then retreat. But as soon as he attacked, he was stopped by Fairy Yuqing. No matter how he tried to break out and dodge, he could not escape from Fairy Yuqing's entanglement. In his rage, he could only give up on attacking Ji Tianqing and decided to deal with Fairy Yuqing first. Chapter 2476 X to the power of 8 1 Z 0 degrees M. Translator, Nicefold Studio Editor, Nicefold Studio. Boom. 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 Deafening noises exploded in the sky, reverberating endlessly. The 5 martial gods had all used their divine abilities and secret techniques, and it was difficult to tell who would win. Dazzling rainbow divine light illuminated a radius of 5,000 kilometers, making this area look like a divine realm. Layer after layer of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping through heaven and earth. All the mountain ranges and peaks within a radius of 5,000 kilometers were razed to the ground. The ground had turned into ruins, filled with deep pits and ravines. It was a complete mess. This was a great battle that could destroy heaven and earth. Fortunately, it had happened in the depths of the ruins of God. No matter how much damage it caused, it would not harm the innocent people. At the same time, no one could get close to watch the battle. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Shenwu continent. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The 5 powerhouses were divided into 2 groups, and they had already exchanged tens of thousands of blows. The battlefield had also shifted 30,000 kilometers. Fairy Yuqin and Ling Xian were still unable to determine a victor, and the battle was very anxious. Both of them were exhausted and in a sorry state. Their bodies were covered in wounds and bloodstains, and they looked like 2 bloody men. Originally, Fairy Yuqin was a martial god who had been famous for thousands of years, and her strength was extremely strong. Ling Xian had just broken through to the deity realm, and his foundation was still shallow. Logically speaking, it should be easy for Fairy Yuqin to defeat Ling Xian. However, Fairy Yuqin had been injured twice in a row, and her injuries had already worsened. She only had about 40% of her strength left. Ling Xian was weaker, but he had inherited the ancestral God-Fiend Sky-Fiend physique, and he had abnormal defense and recovery abilities. Even if his body was covered in bloody holes and wounds, and dozens of demon bones and internal organs could be clearly seen, he could still hold on. On the other side, Ji Tianqing and the Messenger of the Ruins of God were still desperately attacking General Dragon Subduing. Unfortunately, both sides were equally matched. Or rather, it would be more appropriate to say that both sides would suffer. General Dragon Subduing's huge body was covered in hundreds of wounds that crisscrossed, and blood flowed out. Even the black dragon on his left shoulder had its neck severed by Ji Tianqing's god-slaying flying dagger. As for the emissary of the divine ruins and Ji Tianqing's injuries, they were also tragic and had severely weakened their battle prowess. Finally, the power of the emissary of the divine ruins became weaker and weaker, and he could not hold on any longer. He hesitated for a moment before sending a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing. "Kid, it's not a good idea for us to be in a stalemate like this. It's very likely that we'll exhaust our god power and fall into a passive state. The dragon subduing general still has reinforcements, but we don't. We can't die together with him." Ji Tianqing cast his arts to fend off General Dragon Subduing's attacks while sending a voice transmission. "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I had the same intention as well. Why don't I hold off General Dragon Subduing while you assist Fairy Yuqing to get rid of Ling Xian first? Ling Xian's strength is weaker, he can be used as a breakthrough." The emissary of the divine ruins' turbid eyes flashed as he hurriedly nodded in agreement. "That's a good idea. However, you are better at restraining demons than this old man. Therefore, I will hold off General Dragon Subduing while you go and kill Ling Xian." Ji Tianqing was a little hesitant as he asked in a worried tone, "Can you hold on?" The emissary of the divine ruins answered without hesitation, "Definitely within half an hour." Ji Tianqing no longer hesitated as he nodded. "All right, then be careful." With that, he made a feint at General Dragon Subduing and retreated hundreds of miles away. After shaking off General Dragon Subduing, he flew across the sky at lightning speed and hurried towards the battlefield 2,000 miles away. There, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still fighting to the death. Neither of them was willing to back down. Ji Tianqing maintained his invisible state and silently arrived at the battlefield. He lay dormant for a few breaths of time before he found an opportunity to strike. He decisively took out the god-slaying flying dagger. Swoosh! The 3-inch flying dagger cut through the sky and lit up with a dazzling golden light as it ruthlessly pierced towards Ling Xian's back. Ling Xian immediately sensed the danger. His pupils constricted as he used his teleportation skill without even turning his head to dodge the flying dagger. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed coldly as he brazenly attacked. "This is the moment I've been waiting for. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist." He abruptly raised his fists and recklessly punched at the empty sky 100 miles in front of him. Kaboom! 2 mountain-like phantoms of dragons and elephants instantly shattered that part of the sky, turning it into a shattered pitch-black void. Violent and devastating shockwaves erupted, mixed with a pitch-black void storm. There was also a figure with a crooked and wretched appearance. That figure was Ling Xian. He had just entered the alternate space and was in the process of teleporting when Ji Tianqing shattered the space and forcefully squeezed him out. The power of the shattering space far surpassed that of a knife or an axe. It directly shattered his internal organs and meridians. He staggered into the sky and opened his mouth to spit out a large mouthful of blood mixed with many pieces of internal organs. While lifting his sleeve to wipe off the blood stains on his face, he suddenly raised his head to look at Ji Tianqing and roared with a ferocious expression. "Ji Tianqing! You despicable and shameless villain, how dare you sneak attack me?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered, "These words coming from your mouth are really ironic." As his voice fell, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb with all his strength, fiercely slashing out a blazing white giant sword. God-slaying sword. The heaven-mending orb in his mind spewed out endless divine power, which condensed into a 1,000-meter-long giant divine sword through the sword of burial of heaven. Swoosh! The giant divine sword fell from the sky and slashed towards Ling Xian's head with a loud bang. Before the giant sword arrived, the dazzling white light had already illuminated a radius of 3,000 miles, dispelling all the darkness. The terrifying suppressive power sealed an area of 100 miles, causing the space to almost freeze. Ling Xian's body was bent, but he clenched his teeth and held on, recklessly erupting with all his strength. "Ji Tianqing! I will never lose to you, don't even think about it. Fallen devil, darkness indestructible." As his angry roar sounded, his burly body suddenly ignited with purple flames that soared into the sky, emitting endless black demonic fog. The purple flames and the black fog mixed together and turned into a vortex that was dozens of miles wide, spinning at an extreme speed. This was the ultimate skill that Ling Xian obtained from the ancestral devil god. He had just succeeded in cultivating it not long ago and had not used it yet. He turned himself into the fallen devil Qi. Even if the vortex was destroyed, as long as there was a trace of devil Qi, he could recover again. This was the first time he used this ultimate skill. But, it was also the last time. Boom! Amidst the deafening loud noise, the giant divine sword ruthlessly stabbed into the devil Qi vortex. The vortex spun with all its might, and the purple flames flashed wildly, wrapping around the giant divine sword in a futile attempt to dissolve the power of the giant divine sword. However, the vortex and the giant divine sword were only in a deadlock for a moment before quickly disintegrating like snow under the scorching sun. In just 2 short breaths, all the purple flames and fallen devil Qi were purified by the divine light. As a result, Ling Xian also no longer existed, completely dying out. Old Tai, set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese Networko. Chapter 2477. Ling Xian was completely dead. He had just inherited the power and status of the ancestor fiend god and was about to lead the demon race to glory. He had thought that he would be the one laughing in the end. But the truth was the opposite. He had just gone out with General Dragon subduing for the first time and had died under Ji Tianqing's sword. It was too depressing, too surprising. Swoosh! A black stone the size of a fist fell from the sky. This was the boundless divine stone that General Dragon subduing had given to Ling Xian. When Ling Xian and Fairy Yuqing were fighting, he had used this divine stone several times to resolve fatal dangers. Unfortunately, Ling Xian did not have the chance to use it during the battle with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light, grabbing the boundless divine stone in his palm. He only looked at it twice before putting it into his space ring to study it in the future. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Fairy Yuqing took out 2 divine pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. She did not waste any time and hurriedly asked Ji Tianqing, "How is the old man? Let's go and help him, otherwise he won't be able to hold on." Ji Tianqing nodded and brought her to the messenger of the divine ruins and General Dragon subduing. When the two of them arrived near the battlefield, they saw General Dragon subduing attacking fiercely, forcing the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. In just a few breaths, the messenger of the divine ruins had been stabbed 3 times, and blood spurted out. But he stubbornly held on and fought General Dragon subduing with all his might. Originally, when Ji Tianqing left the battle, General Dragon subduing chased after him without any regard. The messenger of the divine ruins had used all his skills to stall General Dragon subduing. General Dragon subduing could not escape and was about to kill the messenger of the divine ruins in anger before dealing with Ji Tianqing. But before he could kill the messenger of the divine ruins, Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing had arrived. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing appear, General Dragon subduing's expression darkened and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Of course, he could guess that Ling Xian was most likely dead. Previously, he had brought Ling Xian, the 12 captains, and dozens of heaven-punishing clan warriors with him. Now, everyone had died in battle, and he was the only one left. The strong sense of defeat caused him to be filled with rage, and he even had the intention to retreat. He had a premonition that this operation was going to fail. With his strength, it was basically impossible for him to defeat Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing. This was indeed the case. When Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing joined the battle, the pressure on General Dragon subduing instantly increased. The situation was completely reversed. The dragon subduing general was besieged by 3 people and immediately fell into a disadvantage. Ji Tianqing's killing intent rose and he wanted to take the chance to get rid of the dragon subduing general to prevent any future troubles. Therefore, he did not hold back at all and used his strongest killer move. The god-slaying flying knife was also hiding at the side, ready to deal a fatal blow to the dragon subduing general. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Rising Sword. Boom 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 boom. Earth-shattering sounds kept erupting, and dazzling divine light bloomed, covering thousands of miles. The two sides exchanged over 300 moves, shattering the sky within several thousand li. The ground had also turned into a vast expanse of ruins. Finally, the dragon subduing general's injuries were too severe, and he could not hold on any longer. There was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was intact, and he was covered with crisscrossing wounds and bloody holes. The 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders had their necks cut off, and blood flowed freely. Especially on his forehead, there was a long and narrow sword wound that extended all the way to the center of his brows. Just a little more and his head would have been cut off by the sword of burial of heaven. Also, the dragon subduing general's strength was rapidly weakening, and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he might be killed on the spot. Damn it! Looks like there's no way to get rid of Ji Tianqing today. I can only think of a long-term plan. The dragon subduing general gritted his teeth and immediately decided to retreat. He waved his blood blade with all his might, forcing Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. Then, he formed a seal with his left hand, and his body lit up with dark red blood light. With a swoosh, he broke through the sky. With a flash of blood light, he escaped into an alternate space and disappeared. Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing immediately released their divine senses and used their spatial powers to search for his traces and aura. However, the dragon subduing general had already passed through several layers of alternate spaces and moved thousands of miles away. Even if the 3 of them wanted to kill him, they had no way to do so. Helpless, Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing could only give up. Damn it! He actually escaped. It will be difficult to kill him next time. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth, his heart filled with anger. The messenger of the divine ruins was also filled with regret. He coughed and said, "No wonder the heaven punishers are invincible and no one can stop them. The dragon subduing general's strength is really terrifying." Fairy Yuqing nodded in agreement. Logically speaking, he is only at the 8th level of the martial god realm and is on par with us. But his battle experience is so rich that it's terrifying, and the number of divine abilities and ultimate skills he has mastered is as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Ji Tianqing suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Seniors, don't worry. Even if the dragon subduing general escapes today, he will only be struggling at death's door and live for a few more months. Now that his wings have been cut off, he is alone and can no longer invade and expand." Seeing that he was full of confidence, the messenger of the divine ruins and Fairy Yuqing also calmed down. The three of them were silent, and the atmosphere was awkward and gloomy. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed to the two of them, breaking the silence. "I never thought that the two of you would help me at such a critical moment. I, Ji Tianqing, will remember this kindness in my heart and will never forget it." The messenger of the divine ruins waved his hand and said in a solemn tone, "There is no need to be so polite. The dragon subduing general is from another race and wants to invade the entire Shenwu continent. At this moment of life and death, we should join forces to fight against the enemy." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Senior's injuries are so tragic. It is better for you to go back and recuperate early to avoid any future troubles." The messenger of the divine ruins nodded to show that he understood and said in a complicated tone, "I know that after you recover from your injuries, you will definitely find the dragon subduing general for revenge and eliminate the root of the problem. Although I want to help you, I can't leave the divine ruins, so I can't help you. After all, I am only a mausoleum keeper." Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Senior, you worry too much. I have my own ways to deal with the dragon subduing general." The messenger of the divine ruins did not say anything else and bid farewell to him and Fairy Yuqing before turning to leave. In the sky, only Fairy Yuqing and Ji Tianqing were left. Ji Tianqing looked at Fairy Yuqing and said, "Thank you for your help, Fairy Yuqing." Fairy Yuqing waved her hand and said earnestly, "You don't have to thank me. The reason why I helped was because I had my own selfish motives. Just like how I helped Luo Shui back then, I had the same thought. I only hope that the two of you won't hold a grudge against Luo Shui. After Yunyao inherits Goddess Yaoguang's inheritance, don't forget to unlock the world seal and give all the martial gods a chance of survival and hope." Chapter 2478. Fairy Yuqing's words stunned Ji Tianqing. He frowned in confusion and asked, "Fairy Yuqing, I can understand your feelings. But are you sure that Yunyao can break the world seal?" Fairy Yuqing hesitated for a moment and said with uncertainty, "About the world seal, it happened in the ancient times 30,000 years ago. It had happened so long ago that no one knew the truth or the inside story. The only clue we know is Goddess Yaoguang, so we can only pin our hopes on this." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I understand. Please don't worry, if Yunyao really has such ability, we will definitely do our best. But if she can't do anything, then you can only find another way." The hope in Fairy Yuqing's eyes dimmed a lot, and she nodded with a lonely expression. "My injuries are too serious, so I have to return to Jade Clear Sky to recuperate. I'll leave you a communication jade slip. If there's any news, let me know, so that I won't have to wait needlessly." After saying that, Fairy Yuqing left a communication jade slip and turned to leave. Her back view was bleak and lonely, like a beauty in her twilight years and a hero about to die. Ji Tianqing was experienced, so he could understand that feeling of helplessness and powerlessness. After standing on the spot for a moment, he took out the small golden tower. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, his figure disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, he returned to Jiutian 10 Extremes Tower and appeared on the 5th floor. The previous continuous battles had also caused him to be seriously injured, and his strength was also extremely weak. He hurriedly returned to the 6th floor of the distorted spacetime and went into seclusion to recuperate in a dark and secluded place. Time always passed quickly in the distorted spacetime. Unknowingly, Ji Tianqing had been recuperating in seclusion for more than half a year. His injuries had finally healed, and his strength had also returned to its peak. However, he did not end his cultivation. He continued to cultivate for another 2 months, and naturally broke through to the second level of the martial god realm. Ever since he broke through to the martial god realm, the progress of his strength had slowed down. If he had not fought with so many martial god realm experts and fought with General Fu Long, he would not have advanced so quickly. After breaking through to the second level of the martial god realm, his combat strength had increased by several times, and his aura was even more sacred and majestic. After finishing his cultivation, he took out the sword of burial heaven and opened the world in the sword. Without a doubt, Yun Yao's soul had already finished the fusion and she had already woken up. She was cultivating within peaceful Earth City. She was in an extremely profound, elegant, and otherworldly state. She was like an inconspicuous speck of dust, yet she was as tranquil as a wisp of cloud. It wasn't until Ji Tianqing woke her up that she ended her cultivation and left the sword world. Swoosh! 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 Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, at that time, Luo Shui forcefully fused his soul with yours and you fell into a coma. A few days later, General Fu Long and Ling Xian led the experts of the Heaven Punisher race to attack us. They wanted to capture us all. Fortunately, Old Man God and Fairy Yuqing helped. We killed Ling Xian and all the experts of the Heaven Punisher race. Only General Fu Long managed to escape. Ji Tianqing told Yun Yao what had happened. Yun Yao nodded slightly with a complicated expression. She said in a low voice, Tianqing, I'm sorry, but there's something I have to tell you. The current me is no longer myself. She sighed with a lonely expression. Her lips curled into a self-mocking smile. She murmured, the words the Divine Master said before he died were exactly the same. She did not disappear. Instead, she continued on in another way. I am not only Yun Yao, but also Luo Shui and Goddess Yaoguang. At this point, Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes. Her voice trembled as she asked, Tianqing, when I'm no longer myself, will you still treat me the same as before? Ji Tianqing could see that she was hesitating and struggling in her heart. She was even worried and afraid. After all, she was just Yun Yao in the past. She had her own memories, independent thoughts, and emotions. But now, she had suddenly merged with Luo Shui's emotions and Goddess Yaoguang's memories. Her soul had also become complicated. In her opinion, she was no longer pure. It was as if she had 3 personalities. It was a rare and strange thing. She was very worried that Ji Tianqing would not be able to accept her. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment. He looked at her with a firm and sincere gaze and smiled. Yao Yao, you don't have to say sorry. This is not your fault. In fact, the fact that you can have such thoughts proves that you are still you. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yaoguang, they can't control your emotions and mind. They can't change your nature and thoughts. They are just accessories to you. They give you 2 more memories and experience. This way, you will become more mature and stable. You will grow faster. Hearing his answer, Yun Yao felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She heaved a sigh of relief. The worry and fear in her heart had all dissipated. Her expression also returned to normal. Tianqing, thank you. Yun Yao nodded solemnly. A faint smile appeared on her face. Ji Tianqing reached out and hugged her. He patted her back gently and comforted her. Don't worry. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yaoguang's memories, they won't hurt you. What we need to do is to inherit their legacy and fulfill their unfulfilled wishes. For example, the seal of the five elements world has suppressed this world for 30,000 years. It has cut off the path of all martial gods. You need to work hard in your cultivation and become strong enough to break the seal for everyone. Yunyao nodded and explained, although I've finished fusing with my spirit, most of the memories related to Goddess Yaoguang are still sealed. My strength is not high enough, so I can't come into contact with those ancient taboos. I also don't know if I can break the seal. In fact, I don't even know if the seal has anything to do with me. However, I'll try my best. Ji Tianqing had already expected this outcome. He comforted her, "It's fine. There's no need to rush this matter. We have plenty of time. You can continue to cultivate here and try to fuse with your spirit's memories as well as Luo Shui's strength as soon as possible. I still have important matters to attend to, so I need to go out." Luo Shui was dead, martial god Tianjue was dead, and Ling Xian had also fallen. The situation on the continent had become even more chaotic. Ji Tianqing needed to find out more about the situation on the Xinwu continent and stabilize the situation as soon as possible. When the time was right, he would go and kill General Fu Long. Then, the world would be at peace. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Yun Yao grabbed his hand and gently said, "Tianqing, wait. There's still something very important. What is it?" Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and revealed a puzzled expression. Yun Yao lowered her head slightly and whispered, "I have a premonition that Chen Chen and Yaya's pregnancy is about to end. They will be born soon." End of chapter. Chapter 2479. Yun Yao's voice was very soft, but Ji Tianqing could still hear it clearly. When he heard this good news, his body trembled, and a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea of stars, shone with a bright light. "Really? Our children are about to be born." It had been several years since Yun Yao had given birth to the children. Chen Chen and Yaya were extremely intelligent, and they possessed shocking innate talents. Even though they were still in their mother's womb, the two children already possessed extraordinary strength. In the first few years, Ji Tianqing had often hoped that the children would be born soon. But after a long time, the children still hadn't been born, and his hopes had faded. Now, Yun Yao had suddenly told him this good news, so how could he not be overjoyed? After all, he had lived 2 lives, but this was his first time becoming a father. Yun Yao lowered her head shyly, and her hands gently caressed her swollen belly. She said gently, "My senses are not wrong. The 2 children have already fallen into a deep sleep, and they won't wake up for a while. They won't wake up until the day they are born, and then we will be able to see them." Ji Tianqing nodded and laughed heartily. "Good. Then I will strive to completely eliminate the Heaven Punisher before the children are born, and I will return peace to Xinwu continent." Yun Yao then gave him a few more words of advice before he left the distorted spacetime. 6 days later, Ji Tianqing left the ruins of God, entered the vast divine kingdom, and arrived at Skycloud City. As he hurried along, he roughly observed the situation in the vast divine kingdom. More than 95% of the territory had been reclaimed by the vast divine kingdom and returned to the human race. The remaining demons were extremely few in number, and they were all stragglers, so they weren't a threat at all. Peace had also been restored in the Outcloud Empire. Skycloud City, which had been razed to the ground, was still the capital of the Outcloud Empire. It was being rebuilt in full swing, and more than half of it had been completed. Ji Tianqing met with Taihao Yun VII in the recently completed Imperial Palace. Taihao Yunqi was very welcoming of his arrival, and he was very excited. After the two of them met, Taihao Yunqi did not receive him in the main hall. Instead, he brought him to the study. The two of them sat down in the study and began to discuss business. With a smile on his face, Taihao Yunqi looked at Ji Tianqing and asked respectfully, "Senior, you haven't shown up for several months. During this period of time, you must have been doing something earth-shattering, right? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, it seems that you have gotten some news. Taihao Yun 7 nodded repeatedly and excitedly said, half a month ago, a piece of news spread throughout the Shenwu continent, and it shook the entire world. The entire martial arts world was in an uproar. It was said that a few peerless martial god realm experts were fighting a great battle in the depths of the ruins of God, causing the heavens and earth to crumble and the sun and moon to dim in comparison. After that battle, many martial gods disappeared without a trace. However, what we can be sure of is that the Heaven Punisher race has suffered many casualties, and the leader of the Devil race has also fallen. As Taihao Yun 7 spoke, he observed Ji Tianqing's reaction. When he saw that Ji Tianqing did not refute him, he became even more certain of his conjecture, and he said with admiration, when I first heard this news, I was so shocked that I could not believe it. However, after thinking about it carefully, I realized that this matter was most likely related to you. Even the new leader of the Devil race was most likely killed by you, right? Ji Tianqing did not hide it and nodded. That's right. I killed the ancestral demon god, and Ling Xian inherited his power and became the new leader. Moreover, Ling Xian joined the dragon-subduing general and followed him to the ruins of God to get rid of me. However, I had the help of 2 senior experts, and they killed a large number of heaven punishers as well as Ling Xian. Only the dragon-subduing general managed to escape with serious injuries. When he heard this, Taihao Yunseven's eyes widened, and he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He was so excited that he almost stood up. Heavens! This is too unbelievable. If the situation is as you say, then our only enemy now is the dragon-subduing general. That's right. Ji Tianqing nodded and calmly said, as long as we get rid of the dragon-subduing general, the heaven punishers will also collapse, and the Shenwu continent will welcome peace. That's great. Taihao Yun 7 was so excited that he could not help but clench his fists and cheer. Ji Tianqing picked up his teacup and took a sip. He then said slowly, Godchild, tell me about the boundless divine kingdom and the Shenwu continent. Taihao Yun 7 hurriedly suppressed his excitement and solemnly explained, Senior, thanks to your help, the boundless divine kingdom's territory has basically been recovered. The Devil race army that invaded the divine kingdom has basically been annihilated, and only a small number of them managed to escape back to Dark North Mountain. After martial god Tianju fell, the various empires fell into chaos, as they all wanted to unify and annex other countries. However, the Heaven Punishers took advantage of the situation and took control of several empires. However, this is not a cause for concern. As long as you kill the dragon-subduing general, the Heaven Punishers will lose their leader, and they will be like a pile of loose sand that can be quickly defeated. As for Dark North Mountain, its vitality has been greatly damaged after this war, so it is not a cause for concern. After news of the new demon god's death spread, the Devil race fell into panic and despair, and they all went into hiding, not daring to show their faces. However, the Heaven Punishers were not willing to give up. In the name of appeasing the Devil race, they wantonly recruited warriors from Dark North Mountain and formed an army. However, many of the Devil race's tribes have no one to use. When they learned that the Heaven Punishers were capturing warriors everywhere, many of the Devil race hid in their underground lairs and dangerous places to avoid disaster. At this point, Taihao Yun 7 helplessly sighed and said in a low voice, the most tense situation right now is the Luoshui Divine Kingdom's territory, which is still occupied by the Heaven Punishers. All of the humans have become slaves of the Heaven Punishers, and they are currently in an abyss of suffering and suffering. In fact, I heard that the Heaven Punishers have become even more ruthless recently, and they have been exploiting the commoners even more. They are crazily excavating and collecting resources. Ji Tianqing nodded to indicate that he understood. His tone was cold as he said, this is just their final madness, and it will not last for long. About 80% of the Heaven Punishers' martial gods have already died. They are already panicking. With their current strength, it is impossible for them to take over the entire Shenwu continent. In fact, they cannot even maintain the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom's territory. I reckon that the Heaven Punishers want to obtain some more resources and then retreat after they are defeated. Taihao Yun 7 nodded in agreement. That's right, I think so too. Senior, what should we do next? Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and then asked, Shensi, how are your father's injuries? Taihao Yun 7 hurriedly replied, thank you for your concern, Senior. I asked him a few days ago, and he said that he was fine and would come out of seclusion soon. Ji Tianqing smiled and ordered, then send a message to Taihao and ask him to help me kill General Fu Long. End of chapter. Chapter 2480. Ever since the fall of the Luo Shui divine nation, all of its territories had been controlled by the Heaven Punisher race. Even the Luo Shui mountain, which symbolized the majesty of the divine nation, had been taken over by the dragon-subduing general. Before the fall of the Luo Shui divine nation, the disciples and elders of the Luo Shui mountain had fled in all directions. Most of them had died tragically under the Heaven Punisher race's blade in the process of resisting them. Only a small number of people were still alive, but they were scattered all over the continent. They were either enslaved by the Heaven Punisher race or became homeless wanderers. The dragon-subduing general had taken over the Luo Shui mountain and made it his base camp. It was now evening. The setting sun was about to set in the sky, sprinkling down an orange-red afterglow that looked like blood. At the peak of the Luo Shui mountain, in the most majestic and dignified dragon-subduing palace. In a dimly lit secret room filled with dark red fog, General Dragon Subduing was quietly sleeping. This specially made secret chamber was located underground and had a radius of 3,000 meters. Only then was it barely able to contain his mountain-like body. His body was wrapped in dark red light as he circulated his energy to heal his injuries. His muscular body was covered with crisscrossing scars, which still looked hideous and terrifying. However, as time passed, the dark red fog continued to flow, and those scars were rapidly disappearing. Suddenly, a respectful voice came from outside the secret chamber. Lord General, Deputy General and requests an audience. Hearing the black-armored guard's voice, the sleeping dragon-subduing general slowly opened his dark purple eyes. Let him in. The dragon-subduing general moved his wide mouth and let out a low roar that was as deep as thunder. Then, the tall and majestic stone door of the secret chamber slowly opened. And Yu, who was wearing golden armor and looking travel-worn, stepped into the secret chamber. After he entered the secret chamber, the heavy stone door closed with a bang. And Yu walked in front of the dragon-subduing general and bowed respectfully. Subordinate and Yu greets the Lord General. After that, he carefully sized up the dragon-subduing general and instantly frowned. He asked worriedly, Lord General, why are you so heavily injured? The dragon-subduing general did not stop healing. As he circulated the dark red fog, he said, this is all thanks to that bastard Ji Tianqing. And Yu's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in disbelief, Ji Tianqing. That's impossible. How can he be your opponent? The dragon-subduing general sneered and said slowly, if he was alone, of course, he would not be my opponent and I would have killed him. However, he still has two helpers. One is an old man who guards the divine ruins, and the other is an old woman who is Luo Shui's master. That is. And Yu was suddenly enlightened and he heaved a sigh of relief. The dragon-subduing general. Subduing general looked. Was the subduing general? He subduing general said dragon-subduing general had general. Was subduing general. Subduing general. And Yu's body stiffened, and his face turned ugly. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, General, please calm down. It's all my fault. I didn't investigate properly. Without waiting for him to finish, the dragon-subduing general waved his hand and said, this is a tragic lesson. You must remember it well. It's too late to confess now. I don't have many people left. So, what you need to do is to atone for your sins. And Yu quickly nodded and said, this subordinate understands, I will definitely remember General's teachings. The dragon-subduing general continued, in this invasion of the Five Elements world, I am heavily injured. I also lost more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 40 captains. Such losses are unprecedented and will never be repeated. In the past few hundred years, I have led the fleet to conquer more than half of the galaxy and invaded more than 100 worlds. I have never encountered such a mysterious world. And you nodded in agreement. That's right. The Five Elements world is not only mysterious, but also very special. We have traversed more than half of the Purple Cloud galaxy and have never seen a world sealed by a deity. Moreover, there are not many martial gods in this world, but they have extremely terrifying supernatural powers and techniques. General, please forgive me for being blunt. I'm afraid we have to prepare to retreat. He. The dragon-subduing general suddenly laughed coldly. He stared at Yu coldly and asked, what? You're scared? The final battle is not here yet. Do you think I will lose to that bastard Ji Tianqing? And Yu was intimidated by the powerful aura. He knelt on the ground in fear and quickly kowtowed to apologize. General, please calm down. I don't mean to belittle you. It's just that you are heavily injured and Ji Tianqing still has two powerful helpers. If we withdraw our defenses, we can still fight them. But we have occupied the territories of two divine kingdoms. We are too spread out. The dragon-subduing general ignored him and said in a domineering and imposing tone, those two old fellows only have half of their lives left. How would they dare to come and find me? As for Ji Tianqing, he would not dare to come to me alone for revenge. Otherwise, I'll definitely tear him into pieces. And Yu quickly nodded in agreement and said firmly, that's right. With Ji Tianqing's strength, he's definitely not a match for Lord General. You can easily crush him. With that, the dragon-subduing general's anger dissipated. The atmosphere in the secret room calmed down and the pressure on Yu also lessened. He hesitated before asking, General, I think, to be on the safe side, why don't you give the order to gather the other 50 captains? Or you can report this to the Grand Marshal. After all, the Five Elements world is too special. There are even ancient demonic gods reincarnated and divine kings reincarnated thousands of years ago. Originally, the dragon-subduing general frowned and wanted to interrupt Yu. But in the end, he fell silent and nodded. That's right. The legends of ancient demonic gods and human goddesses, as well as Kenshin who died thousands of years ago, have all reappeared. This Five Elements world must have some kind of secret and power that no one knows. This is very important. If we report this to the Grand Marshal, he will definitely take it seriously. Seeing that the dragon-subduing general had agreed, Yu smiled and said, that's right. By then, you will be able to make a great contribution and gain the Grand Marshal's recognition. I have heard you say that our great emperor is connected to the Divine Kingdom and only follows the will of the Divine Kingdom. The dragon-subduing general's expression changed and he scolded sternly, shut up. This is a secret that involves the Divine Kingdom of the Upper Realm. How dare you speak of it? And Yu shrunk his neck and said respectfully, General, please calm down. There are only the two of us here. You don't have to worry about the secret being leaked. I am also thinking of your future. That's why I brought this up. Think about it, if the Divine Kingdom knows that there is a mortal world sealed by the gods and there is a miracle of an ancient demonic god reincarnated. End of chapter. Chapter 2481. And Yu did not finish his sentence. However, General Dragon-subduing had already understood what he meant. The two of them looked at each other. After a moment of silence, they both burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha. General Dragon-subduing raised his head and laughed. And you are really daring. How dare you guess the will of the god's court? And you revealed a knowing expression and said with a smile, the will of the god's court is naturally unpredictable and complicated. It is not something ordinary people like us can guess. However, I believe that if the god's court knows that such a miracle has appeared in the mortal world, they will be very interested. As the person who discovered this secret, you will definitely become the greatest contributor to our race. When the time comes, you will receive God's grace and directly ascend to the upper world. It is not impossible. Anyu's flattery made General Dragon Subduing's heart sway as he secretly yearned for it. However, he did not lose his mind and quickly calmed down. He shook his head gently and said, "It is very possible that I will be rewarded for my contributions. As for directly ascending to the upper world with God's grace, that is no different from a fool's dream. Even our martial and great emperor can only be trapped in the mortal world and serve the god's court. They are all true gods who have broken through to the martial god realm." At this point, General Dragon Subduing's tone was also filled with emotions. Enyu was very smart. He knew that he could not continue to interrupt, so he remained silent. After a long while, General Dragon Subduing regained his composure and said in a dignified tone, "This time, I will listen to your advice and report this to the marshal. In addition, I summoned you back because I want you to stay behind and protect me. During this period of time, you will be in charge of everything. You must be careful of Ji Tianqing's revenge." And you hesitated and asked with a frown, "General, what about the affairs of Tianju God Nation?" "During this period of time, I have been in charge of Tianju God Nation and have been taking in all the empires and forces. The progress has been quite smooth. If I am away for too long, I am afraid that the situation that has been stabilized with much difficulty will fall apart again." General Dragon Subduing glanced at him and said coldly, "Just now, I was praising you for being sensible and smart enough. I did not expect you to be so muddle-headed on this matter. Our top priority right now is to pull back our defensive forces and prepare for the decisive battle with Ji Tianqing. So what if he temporarily gave up on the Heaven Extinction God Nation? As long as we get rid of Ji Tianqing and kill those two old fellows, the entire Five Elements world will be ours." Enyu's eyes flashed with reluctance. He lowered his head and bowed. This subordinate obeys. After Ji Ku heard everything, she was both shocked and excited. Her eyes shone even brighter. She couldn't help but praise him. She couldn't wait to say, "That's great. Big brother Tianqing, since you and big senior sister's injuries have healed, what are we waiting for? Let's take advantage of the fact that the dragon subduing general's injuries haven't healed and quickly attack his nest." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's indeed my plan. This matter shouldn't be delayed. However, don't be impatient. I'll go check on the others." Thus, Ji Ku suppressed her excitement and anticipation and followed him to visit the others. The two of them first visited the Black Dragon and Qianyu. The two of them were still focused on cultivating. Their strength had already reached the 7th and 8th rank martial sage realm and they were preparing to break through to the god state. After that, Ji Tianqing brought Ji Ku to visit the White Dragon and Lan Kuan. The White Dragon did not disappoint Ji Tianqing. He had already refined half of martial god Tian Ju's spiritual soul. He was no longer a white dragon shadow. His strength had reached the 9th rank martial sage realm and he was trying to break through to the god state. Lan Kuan's strength was progressing slower but he had also reached the 7th rank martial sage realm. The four of them had a high chance of breaking through to the god state. Of course, they still needed a long time. Ji Tianqing did not disturb them. After secretly visiting, he brought Ji Ku to find Yunyao. After such a long period of rest, Yunyao had already recovered to her peak state. Her strength was stronger than Luo Shui's. In fact, among the three of them, she was the strongest. End of chapter. Chapter 2482. Yunyao had a premonition that the two children were about to be born. However, this was not something that would happen in the near future. It would still take a long time. After the three of them met, Ji Tianqing asked about Yunyao's situation with concern. He was a little hesitant as to whether or not he should bring Yunyao along. However, Yunyao knew that he was ready and was about to take action. Thus, she said with a resolute expression, "Tianqing, I have already recovered to my best condition. You don't have to worry. Although General Long Fu is seriously injured, he is an 8th-stage martial god after all. I have to go with you in order to have a chance to kill General Long Fu and completely solve any future problems." Ji Tianqing was a little worried and said in a low voice, "I know all this, but I'm worried that your participation will affect our children." Yunyao shook her head gently. Chen Chen and Yaya are not that delicate. Moreover, they have already matured and will not be affected too much. You don't have to persuade me anymore. I will definitely fight alongside you. Seeing that her attitude was so resolute, Ji Tianqing did not say anything else and nodded in agreement. After that, the three of them left Jiutian 10 Absolute's tower and appeared in the ruins of God. Now that the three of them were unparalleled martial gods, their speed was extremely fast. Each step they took covered hundreds of miles. With the glazed fire dragon's strength and speed, it was no longer useful. Thus, the three of them flew high in the sky and rushed to the eastern part of Shenwu continent as fast as lightning. During the journey, Ji Tianqing took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message. When Ji Ku saw this, he asked, "Brother Tianqing, who did you send a message to? Did you make any arrangements?" Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "In order to ensure that we can successfully kill General Long Fu, I have to use all the available forces. The messengers of the ruins of God cannot leave the ruins of God. Fairy Yuqing has returned to the endless sky sea to cultivate in seclusion. 2 of the 3 divine masters have also fallen. Only martial god Taihao is still alive. I've already discussed it with Taihao and asked him to lend me a hand." It was only then that Ji Ku understood the reason. He nodded solemnly and said, "The 3 of us, together with martial god Taihao, should be able to deal with a heavily injured General Fu Long." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and did not say anything. In fact, he was a little worried and had an uneasy premonition. Noon, Luotian Mountain Peak. More than 30 heaven-punishing race warriors in black armor and wielding sabers and swords escorted a dozen human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood to the center of the square. Even though the sky was cloudless and the sun was shining brightly. However, the atmosphere in the plaza was ice-cold, and the aura of death lingered. Everyone stood in the middle of the square and waited silently. The dozen or so human martial artists who were covered in wounds had long been tortured to the point where they no longer looked human. However, they were captured by the Heaven Punisher warriors. They could neither resist nor move. There were men and women, young and old. But they all had one thing in common. They were all former members of Luotian Mountain. The leader was a hunchbacked old woman with white hair. She was Granny Long. In addition, there were a few older martial artists. They were all elders of Luotian Mountain. There were also 6 middle-aged men who were once deacons of Luotian Mountain. There were also 4 young men and women who were once disciples of Luotian Mountain. Among them were Yiqing Luo, Zhou Bin, and Wen Renyu. A year ago, they were also handsome and talented martial artists. But now, they were all miserable prisoners who had been tortured to the point where their bodies and souls were damaged. Before long, the silence in the plaza was broken. Thud. 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 A series of heavy footsteps came from afar. The footsteps were so heavy that the ground of the plaza started to tremble. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples slowly raised their blood-stained faces and looked toward the palace at the end of the plaza. They saw a ferocious monster that was as large as a mountain walking toward them. The monster with 4 hooves and 2 black dragons on its shoulders was the dragon-subduing general. Following closely behind him was Yu and the 3 silver-armored captains. When they came to the center of the plaza, the 30-odd heaven-punishing race warriors bowed in unison. The dragon-subduing general nodded slightly and raised his large palms. The warriors then straightened their backs and held Granny Long and the others firmly in the air. The dragon-subduing general looked down at everyone from high above. His lips curled into a sinister smile as he spoke in broken human language, "Lowly ants. Do you know why I spared your lowly lives after I took over this territory and didn't kill you?" Hearing this, Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples all raised their heads. Everyone stared at the dragon-subduing general with bloodshot eyes. Their hearts burned with hatred. The dragon-subduing general's gaze swept across the crowd. He sneered and said, "Because 2 very important people are about to return here and reunite with you. And all of you, a bunch of lowly ants, will contribute a little bit of strength to this seat before you die. Use your insignificant lives to give those 2 people a big gift. You are about to be free. You can see your old friends before you die. Are you happy? Ha ha ha." After that, the dragon-subduing general looked up to the sky and laughed. Granny Long raised her head with difficulty and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. She shouted in a hoarse voice, "Dragon-subduing. You cowardly bastard. Kill us if you have the guts." The second elder also raised his head unyieldingly. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he cursed, "Despicable and shameless bastard. Don't you dare use us to threaten the Divine Master. Even if we die, we will never yield to you." The other elders, deacons, and disciples also began to curse and roar. The dragon-subduing general was not angry. He opened his left palm with a sinister smile. Dozens of fist-sized dark red crystals flew out of his huge left palm and floated in the air. The dragon-subduing general looked at Yu behind him and ordered, "Do it." Yu nodded and walked in front of Granny Long. He sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Old hag, you were the one who screamed the loudest just now. Let's start with you." After that, he slowly stretched out his right hand. 6 sharp fingers opened up and pierced into Granny Long's chest like a knife, grabbing her heart. Pooh! With a muffled sound, Granny Long's heart was dug out by Yu's right hand. Dark red blood spurted out from the fist-sized bloody hole. The incomparable pain caused Granny Long's body to tremble violently and she let out a miserable scream. But she was a martial sage and did not die on the spot. Yu waved his hand and took a dark red crystal from the air and stuffed it into the hole in Granny Long's chest. Then, he formed a few hand seals and shot out a few dark red rays of light that enveloped Granny Long's body. Under the horrified and angry gazes of the crowd, Granny Long gradually fell into a coma and the hole in her chest quickly healed. End of chapter. Chapter 2483. In the blink of an eye, Granny Long's injuries were healed. Other than being unconscious, there was nothing wrong with her. Not long after, she woke up. Her eyes were cloudy, and her body was bent as she stood. Even when the 2 black-armored guards let her go, she did not struggle or run away. She stood there like a puppet. On the surface, she looked the same as before. But the elders, deacons, and disciples could clearly feel that she had changed. She had become muddle-headed and had no thoughts of her own. She was like a puppet being controlled by someone. This scene made the elders, deacons, and disciples feel deeply worried and fearful. The second elder, who was closest to Granny Long, shouted angrily, "Bastard! What did you do to Granny Long?" What he asked was what everyone wanted to know. But General Long and Yu would not answer. Yu sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Hee hee. You want to know the answer? Why don't you try it yourself?" As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his right hand. His sharp fingers pierced into the second elder's chest. He was slow because he wanted to let the second elder feel the pain of having his heart cut out. Blarg, Yu dug out a warm, bright red heart that was covered in blood. He squeezed hard with his right hand, and the heart exploded into a cloud of blood. The second elder screamed and fainted from the pain. And you took out a dark red crystal and stuffed it into the second elder's chest. Then, he cast a few more blood rays into the second elder's body. Not long after, the unconscious second elder woke up and became as stiff as Granny Long. Next, the elders were tortured one by one. Their hearts were cut out. Then, it was the deacons and a few young disciples. After a few minutes, everyone's hearts were cut out and a dark red crystal was planted in their bodies. And you nodded slightly and smiled. He seemed to be very satisfied with his masterpiece. General Long said in a dignified tone, "And you, I'll leave everything here to you. You must make arrangements for them. I've used 16 slaughter crystals. I must see the results." And you quickly turned around and bowed. He said confidently, "General, don't worry. I will do my best." The dragon-subduing general didn't say anything more. He turned around and returned to the palace. After he left, and you ordered the black-armored guards, "Men, tie these lowly commoners to the stake." More than 30 black-armored guards hurriedly escorted everyone to the high platform in the middle of the square. The 300-meter-tall stone platform had been built not long ago, and a powerful divine formation had been set up. On the high platform, 16 thick and sturdy bronze pillars stood erect. Their surface was covered with sharp thorns, blades, and saw-teeth. That evening, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles around the Luotian mountain was covered by dark clouds. Not a single ray of sunlight could be seen. The world was dark and eerily silent. Even the air seemed to have stopped flowing. A formless feeling of oppression lingered in everyone's hearts. Those who were weaker and didn't have enough mental fortitude were actually pressured to the point that they couldn't breathe. At this moment, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the sky above the Luotian mountain. Crack! Following a crisp shattering sound, a wide crack was torn open in the sky by the golden light. 3 figures passed through the golden light and flew out of the crack. They stood in the sky above the mountain and looked down at the mountain peak with cold expressions. They were 3 handsome and peerlessly beautiful young men and women. The young man standing in the middle was wearing a white robe with silver-rimmed cloud patterns. He had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes and an extraordinary aura. There was a stunning beauty on each side of him. One was wearing a fiery red dress and looked delicate and charming. The other was wearing a moon-white dress and looked cold and noble. Without a doubt, these 3 people were Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yun Yao. Before the operation started, Ji Tianqing had learned a lot of information from Taihao Yinqi. He knew that the dragon-subduing general had occupied the Luotian mountain and treated it as his base. Therefore, there was an 80% chance that the dragon-subduing general was hiding on the Luotian mountain to recuperate. Ji Tianqing released his divine perception and enveloped the entire mountain peak. He began to investigate the situation on the mountain peak and search for traces of the dragon-subduing general. At that moment, Yun Yao's expression suddenly changed. She pointed at the square on the mountain peak and said with a frown, "Look." Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku looked in the direction of the voice and their gazes landed on the high platform in the middle of the square. They saw 16 ferocious-looking copper pillars standing on the stone platform that was 1,000 feet tall. There were 16 human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood tied to the copper pillars. They were unable to resist or move. At that moment, 16 black-armored Heaven Punisher warriors were waving long whips that flickered with lightning as they whipped the human martial artists continuously. As crisp cracking sounds rang out, lightning flashed on the high platform and blood splattered everywhere. The 16 human martial artists were tortured until they were covered in cuts and bruises. They were on the verge of death and constantly let out hoarse and desperate cries. Even though the high platform was covered in a layer of blood-red light, it could not block the dull sounds of the long whips whipping their bodies. Upon seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku's faces darkened, and a cold light surged from their eyes. Yunyao recognized the white-haired old woman tied to one of the copper pillars. Her pupils constricted, and she was so angry that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Tianxing. Look. That's Grandma Long. There are also a few elders, deacons. Yi Qing Luo, Zhou Bin, and Wen Ren Yu. Those 16 people are all from the Luotian mountain. Yun Yao's voice trembled. She was angry and heartbroken. Seeing her former companion and friend, Grandma Long, being tortured so miserably, she felt a stabbing pain in her heart, and her body also trembled. Ji Tianqing also felt the same way. His chest burned with rage, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He had not interacted much with those elders, deacons, and disciples. However, in his memory, the disciples of the Luotian mountain were very kind and respectful to him. Especially Grandma Long. She treated him like a nephew and trusted him. She had helped him a lot. Damn those heaven punishers. They invaded the Luotian mountain, captured the disciples of the Luotian mountain, and tortured them like this. Today, I will bathe the Luotian mountain in blood and kill all the heaven punishers. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. His figure flashed as he charged toward the high platform in the middle of the square. Swoosh! In the next instant, he charged onto the high platform and punched out with both fists. Two gigantic phantoms of dragons and elephants, which were as large as mountains, hit the blood-red light barrier with a loud bang. Kaboom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, countless blood-red light fragments burst out and covered the sky. The blood-red light barrier formed by the divine-level defensive array could not withstand the power of the dragon-elephant divine fist and was shattered on the spot. End of chapter. Ji Tianqing subconsciously reached out his hands to help her up. At this moment, Ji Ku's shout came from 1,000 feet behind him. Wait! Ji Tianqing stopped and turned to look at Ji Ku with a questioning expression. Ji Ku quickly shook his head and explained with a serious expression, Big Brother Tianqing, Granny Long and these people, are a little strange. There's something wrong with them. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were stunned. They stared at the elders and disciples and carefully observed them. When they saw Granny Long and the others being tortured, they were extremely angry and neglected the details. After all, Granny Long and the others' faces were covered in blood, and their hair was disheveled. They looked like they were on the brink of death. Now that Ji Ku reminded them, the two of them realized that something was wrong. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' eyes were lifeless and cloudy. It looked as if he had lost his mind, his thoughts, and his consciousness. Oh no, I'm afraid we've been tricked. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. However, before he could leave the high platform, something unexpected happened. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' bodies lit up with blood-red light and suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly burst out, piercing through the 9 heavens and resounding for thousands of miles. 16 people exploded at the same time, and their bodies were blasted into powder. However, an endless dark red light burst out from their bodies, instantly drowning the high platform and covering the sky for hundreds of miles. The overwhelming dark red light gathered into a huge blood-red ball of light that rose into the sky like a flame. The entire Luotian mountain was enveloped by the blood-red light. Within 1,000 miles, there was only the blood-red light between heaven and earth, like a sea of fire. There was no doubt that the entire high platform was blasted into powder. Even the entire square and all the houses and buildings on the mountain peak were razed to the ground and turned into dust. Ji Tianqing was also hit by the terrifying explosion and was sent flying. Swoosh! He was covered in blood as he tumbled in the air, drawing an arc in the sky as he flew to the edge of the cliff 100 miles away. Although he sensed the danger, he circulated his energy to the maximum and used a defensive superpower to form a dark golden shield on the surface of his body. However, the destructive power of the explosion still shattered the dark golden shield. He was covered in wounds, and more than 30 wounds and cracks appeared on his body. Golden divine blood spurted out and soaked his white robe. Boom! Ji Tianqing crashed into the ruins at the edge of the cliff with a dull thud, creating a deep pit in the ground and sending dirt and rocks into the sky. Although Yun Yao was not on the high platform, she was very close to it. She was also sent flying by the blood-red light. Fortunately, she was wearing the dark golden divine armor, which reduced the power of the explosion by 60 to 70%. Moreover, her strength had reached the LV6 martial god realm. Therefore, she was only slightly injured and did not suffer any serious injuries. After she fell into the ruins, she immediately got up and rushed to Ji Tianqing worriedly to check on Ji Tianqing's injuries. As for Ji Ku, she was the furthest away from the high platform and had already sensed that something was wrong. When the blood-red light exploded, she had already used her superpower to form a golden and red fireball to protect herself. However, she was still sent flying dozens of miles away and crashed into the ruins. The divine fireball had collapsed and she had also suffered internal injuries. Her face was pale and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. In the blink of an eye, the sacred and majestic Luotian mountain had become a charred ruin. A few ravines appeared on the mountain and countless rocks collapsed. The mountain peak was on the verge of collapse. The dust and blood-red light that blotted out the sky gradually thinned and dissipated. Ji Ku and Yun Yao ignored their injuries and flew to Ji Tianqing's side. Cough, cough. Ji Tianqing crawled out of the ruins and coughed violently before he staggered to his feet. His long hair was draped behind his head and his body was covered in blood and dirt. However, a dazzling golden light burst out from his body and immediately shook off the dust on his body. Damn the dragon subduing general! He is indeed despicable. He lifted his sleeve to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the sky sharply and shouted with a murderous aura. Although he looked miserable with more than 30 wounds on his body, these injuries were not serious. But in reality, this injury was nothing, and it did not affect him from continuing to fight. After all, he had an extremely powerful and unique divine body. Chapter 2485. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was fine, Yun Yao and Ji Ku were relieved. At this moment, in the northern skies of the Luotian mountain, an arrogant and tyrannical laughter rang out. Ha 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 ha, the sound came from the sky like thunder. Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku looked up and saw a monster as big as a mountain flying toward them from afar. This monster was half human and half beast. Its entire body was covered in black armor, and 2 ferocious black dragons extended from its shoulders. He was the dragon subduing general. Behind him were several hundred black-armored warriors of the heaven-punishing clan. They formed a mighty group. Naturally, there were also 7 martial god-level powerhouses in silver armor among them. And Yu was among them. These were the elites of the heaven punishers. The remaining 1,000 or so black-armored warriors were guarding the territories of the Luo River and Tianju divine kingdoms. The dragon-subduing general came to the sky above Luotian mountain and looked down at Ji Tianqing and the other 2. Seeing that the 3 of them were in a sorry state and were injured, he smirked. Ji Tianqing, are you satisfied with the surprise I prepared for you? Ji Tianqing sneered. Hee hee. Despicable and shameless alien race. You only know how to use such despicable tricks. It's a pity that your trap is too weak. It can only tickle me. Is that so? The dragon-subduing general was not angry. Instead, he continued to smirk. Those 16 human worms were your friends and comrades. You must be very angry to see them turn into ashes with your own eyes, right? Ji Tianqing nodded. That's right. I am very angry. That's why I will kill all the heaven punishers and leave no one alive. That's the only way I can comfort their souls in heaven. Ha ha ha. General Dragon Fu roared with laughter, his face full of disdain. What nonsense! What shameless boasting! Ji Tianqing slowly raised his right hand. A black light flashed in his palm, and he took out the burial of heaven. Cut the crap. General Dragon subduing, your death is here. Hand over your life. Ji Tianqing coldly snorted. His left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the burial of heaven, valiantly slashing out a sword strike. Heaven-splitting sword. The sword of burial of heaven unleashed a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long and shone with golden light. It tore through the sky and slashed towards General Dragon subduing. The dragon subduing general's expression didn't change. He raised his huge palms and slapped out a dark red light, facing the giant sword. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the gigantic sword shattered into millions of golden shards and scattered in the sky. That earth-shattering dark red light was also cut into pieces. At the same time, Yu pulled out his pitch-black saber and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Warriors of the Heaven Punishers, listen up. Kill them at all costs." Ha! Did I hear wrongly? General Dragon subduing, who was so arrogant just now, is actually cowardly in admitting defeat. If you kneel down and surrender now and kowtow to me 100 times, perhaps I will spare your worthless life. But you are so stupid that it's laughable. You actually used the Heaven Punisher race to threaten me. Do you know that I once controlled thousands of deities and ruled over 3,000 worlds? Everywhere I went, the deities and living beings bowed to me. The so-called Heaven Punisher race doesn't even have the right to kneel to me. Such arrogant words were a great humiliation and provocation to General Dragon subduing. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. His eyes turned blood red and blazed with flames. Ji Tianqing. You are too arrogant. General Dragon subduing roared in rage. So what if you were once a supreme being? Now you are just an empty god. In front of a real deity, you are as weak as an ant. Moreover, thousands of years have passed. The world today is no longer the era you were in back then. The Heaven Punisher race has received the deity's decree and unified the entire Purple Cloud Star Zone. This is a trend that no one can reverse. If you swear to be a mantis that blocks a car, you will only be crushed. As he roared, General Dragon subduing struck out with a bloody light that turned into a giant palm and slammed down. Ji Tianqing hurriedly used his ultimate sword skill to block the attack. Hundreds of dazzling golden sword radiances pierced through the giant palm. His robes fluttered as he laughed domineeringly. Received the deity's decree. I am a deity, the king of deities. Dragon subduing, why don't you ask your Heaven Punisher race to kneel and listen to my decree? End of chapter. Chapter 2486. Ji Tianqing's words angered General Dragon subduing so much that he almost vomited blood. Originally, he wanted to use the Heaven Punisher race and the Celestial Court behind them to threaten Ji Tianqing. This way, he could get rid of Ji Tianqing without shedding a drop of blood and easily occupy the Five Elements world. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing did not care about the Heaven Punisher race at all. Even the deities of the upper realm could not pose any threat to Ji Tianqing. General Dragon subduing was at his wit's end. Since he could not persuade Ji Tianqing to surrender, he could only fight until the end and kill him. He was filled with rage as he used his divine powers and ultimate skills, attacking ferociously without regard for anything else. Ji Tianqing counterattacked calmly. He used all kinds of divine powers and ultimate skills as he fought with General Dragon subduing in the sky. The two of them fought fiercely. All kinds of divine powers flashed continuously, illuminating a radius of a few thousand miles. The sky was also shattered, revealing hundreds of thousands of pitch-black cracks. The violent and devastating shockwaves were like rings of multicolored ripples that kept spreading outwards, looking exceptionally gorgeous. 3,000 miles away, at the peak of the Luotian mountain, Yu and 6 silver-armored captains led hundreds of elite warriors to besiege Yunyao and Ji Ku. More than 600 black-armored warriors formed a huge encirclement, sealing off an area of 100 miles. They formed a 6-pointed star battle formation, and their powers merged. They released a dark red light that covered the sky, suppressing Yunyao and Ji Ku. With every breath, hundreds and thousands of blood-red blades would shoot out like a rain of arrows, drowning the two of them. Yunyao wore her dark gold divine armor, and her defense was unparalleled. She could ignore the black-armored warriors' attacks. She waved her shadowless dual swords with a cold expression, and sword shadows filled the sky as she fought with the silver-armored captains. Star Fall. Milky Way Ribbon. Boom. 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 Beams of starry sword light collided with the blood-red light in the sky, creating a deafening sound that reverberated in the sky. Several silver-armored captains were forced back by her attacks, and only then did they manage to block her attacks with all their might. Not long after, the armors of the captains were penetrated. All of them were heavily injured, and their bodies were stained with blood. On the other side, Ji Ku was fighting with Yu and the 2 silver-armored captains. Her entire body was engulfed in golden divine flames, and a pair of phoenix wings materialized behind her back, making her appear especially holy and noble. On her left wrist, she wore a string of sparkling starlight beads, releasing a starlight shield to firmly protect herself. No matter how many bloody blades slashed at her, they were unable to break through her starlight shield and hurt her at all. She stared at Yu and the others with a serious face. She performed a series of hand seals and released the divine flames of different colors. Heaven-burningly fire. Flames of Nirvana. The Nanming primordial fire covered the sky and engulfed Yu and the 2 captains, burning them black all over. Immediately after, the golden flames of Nirvana surged out and turned into 3 pillars of fire that blasted Yu and the others. Boom. 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 Yu and the 2 silver-armored captains were sent flying, and blood gushed out of their mouths and noses. Although Yunyao and Ji Ku were surrounded by hundreds of people, and the difference in numbers between the 2 sides was huge. However, the 2 of them were very powerful, and they were not at a disadvantage at all. The battle lasted for about half an hour, and there was still no clear victor. Ji Ku and Yunyao were not injured, but Yu and the other captains were all covered in dust, and they were in a miserable state. Dozens of the hundreds of black-armored warriors were also killed by the shockwaves of the battle. The terrifying shockwave spread in all directions, and soon destroyed the Luotian mountain. The 10,000-meter-tall mountain finally collapsed under the weight of the shockwaves. The mountain collapsed into a huge pile of rubble, and endless smoke and dust flew everywhere. The ground within 1,000 miles shook from the shockwaves, and there were cracks everywhere. Just as the 2 sides were in the midst of a fierce battle, a dazzling golden divine light suddenly lit up in the sky not far away. Swoosh! That divine light streaked across the sky like lightning, and it instantly traversed 300 miles and arrived at the peak of the Luotian mountain. At that moment, the divine light split into 4 and turned into 4 dazzling guillotines that were thousands of feet long, and they slashed into the crowd. Boom! 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 Following the 4 earth-shattering explosions, a dazzling golden light burst out from the crowd, and countless pieces of corpses and blood splattered everywhere. At least hundreds of black-armored warriors were killed on the spot by the guillotines. The sudden change made the expressions of the black-armored warriors and Yu and the others stiffen. Fear flashed in their eyes. Everyone knew that the powerful human cultivators had come to their aid. Yu and the other captains quickly retreated and put up a defensive and alert posture. The remaining hundreds of black-armored warriors also quickly shrank their formation, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Seeing this, Yun Yao and Ji Ku exchanged looks. They both understood what was going on. They could both guess that the human martial god who had come to their aid was martial god Taihao. As expected, a giant crack appeared in the sky 100 miles to the south, and a sacred golden light lit up. Swoosh! A burly figure passed through the crack and appeared in the sky. It was a middle-aged man wearing golden armor and a purple cloak. It was martial god Taihao. He held a golden broadsword that was as wide as a bench in his hand. He looked coldly at the heaven-punishing warriors and shouted coldly as he charged over. Swoosh! He waved his golden broadsword, and golden light shadows filled the sky as they fell on the heaven-punishing warriors. Bam! 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 Instantly, more than 30 black-armored warriors could not dodge in time and were sliced into pieces by the golden sword shadows. Blood mixed with the pieces of corpses fell from the sky, giving off a thick smell of blood. The hundreds of black-armored warriors' expressions turned extremely ugly. Their eyes were filled with fear and helplessness as they all retreated. Martial god Taihao took the opportunity to charge into the crowd. Like a ferocious tiger in a flock of sheep, he started a massacre. Yun Yao and Ji Ku also took the opportunity to attack Yu and the captains with all their might. A cold light covers heaven and earth, and two sleeves shake the starry sky. Yun Yao moved mysteriously as she waved the shadowless sword with both hands. Her sleeves fluttered, and sword light filled the sky like a fairy scattering flowers. Ji Ku raised her left hand and slapped toward Yu. 9 rings of starlight appeared, suppressing Yu and the two captains. She made a strange hand seal with her right hand. Her index and middle fingers pierced toward the two captains, and 2 beams of white flames shot out. Swoosh! Swoosh! The 2 beams of white flames were like spears. They instantly pierced through the sky, piercing through the 2 captains' silver armor and into their chests. Bam! Bam! Instantly, the scales on the 2 captains' chests shattered, and their bodies exploded. Thousands of pieces of flesh mixed with purple blood fell from the sky, but they were burned to ashes by the divine fire before they fell to the ground. Thus, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and martial god Taihao firmly held the upper hand. Yu, the captains, and the black-armored warriors were all terrified, and their morale was low. They retreated into the distance as they resisted the Three's attacks. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.